Hello, Midnight Wanderers, and welcome to Netheric Horror. This is where ancient whispers rise beneath a crimson sky, carrying you softly into the world of dreams and shadows. Before tonight's haunting story begins, tell me, what corner of the world are you listening from? Drop it in the comments. And if the silence of the night calls to you, don't forget to like, subscribe, and ring the bell so you'll never miss the moon's next dark secret. I've had a few strange experiences in my life, but there are two that stand out more than anything else. They're the kind of stories that most people don't believe when I tell them. Honestly, if I hadn't lived through them myself, I'm not sure I would believe them either. The first happened when I was a teenager. It was July 17th, 1996, and I was spending the day at Smith Point Beach in New York. It was a warm summer afternoon, and everything felt completely normal. Families were relaxing on the sand, kids were running around, and people were swimming in the ocean. I was sitting quietly on the beach, looking out over the water, enjoying the peaceful weather. As I stared toward the horizon, I noticed an airplane flying across the sky from my right to my left. At first, I wasn't paying much attention to it. It looked like any other passenger plane you might see crossing overhead. I remember watching it for a few seconds because it was easy to see against the clear sky. Then, without any warning, everything changed. There was a massive explosion near the front part of one of the wings. It happened so suddenly that my brain couldn't process what I was seeing. 1 second, the plane was flying normally, and the next there was a huge fireball. Pieces of the aircraft seemed to break apart, and the entire plane began falling toward the ocean. Within moments, it disappeared into the water. A thick cloud of black smoke started rising from the crash site. The peaceful beach instantly turned into a place of confusion and panic. People around me were standing, pointing, shouting, and trying to understand what had just happened. I sat there, frozen, unable to move. I had never seen anything like it before. Later, we learned that it was Flight 800. 230 people had lost their lives in that crash. It was heartbreaking to realize that I had witnessed the entire disaster with my own eyes. Seeing something that tragic happen right in front of you is something that never really leaves your mind. Because I had seen the explosion from the beach, investigators later spoke with me about what I had witnessed. I answered their questions as best as I could, describing exactly what I remembered seeing. Even after all these years, I can still picture that moment as clearly as if it happened yesterday. As shocking as that experience was, it wasn't the strangest thing that ever happened to me. The second event remains a complete mystery, and to this day I have absolutely no explanation for it. At the time, I worked in a town that was about an hour away from where I lived. Every day I would take a bus home after work. One evening, my roommate and I happened to be on the same bus, so we spent the ride talking like we usually did. Nothing about that day seemed unusual. We laughed, talked about work, and eventually got off the bus together. From there, we started walking toward our house. We lived only a short distance from the bus stop, so it wasn't a long walk. When we were about 1 block away from home, I remembered that I needed to pick something up from a nearby store. I turned to my roommate and said something like, "Go ahead without me. I'll be home in a few minutes. I just need to stop at the store first." She kept walking toward the house while I headed toward the store. It was still daylight outside. The street was fairly busy, with plenty of traffic moving through the area. There was a McDonald's nearby, and people were walking along the sidewalks. It wasn't a deserted neighborhood or some dark side street. If anything unusual had happened, it seemed like someone would have noticed. I remember starting toward the store. That's the last clear memory I have. The next thing I remember is opening my eyes while several strangers were standing around me. At first, I had no idea what was happening. People were asking if I could hear them. Someone told me not to move because help was on the way. I was lying on the side of the road, completely confused. I couldn't understand why I was there or how I had ended up on the ground. Someone had already called emergency services after finding me unconscious. As I slowly became more aware of my surroundings, I realized something was terribly wrong. According to the people who found me, I had been lying there unconscious for who knows how long before someone noticed me. Even stranger, when investigators later worked out the timeline, they discovered that I had somehow lost nearly 5 hours. 5 entire hours had disappeared. The part that makes the whole thing even harder to understand is that I wasn't found miles away from where I had started. I was found in almost the exact same area where I had last remembered walking. It was as if time had simply vanished. When the paramedics asked me basic questions, I couldn't answer them correctly. Even though I was only about a block away from my own house, I had absolutely no idea where I was. In my mind, I still believed I was back in the town where I worked, the town that was an hour away by bus. Nothing made sense. I couldn't remember taking the bus home. I couldn't remember walking with my roommate. I couldn't even remember leaving work. Those memories had completely disappeared. The missing memories didn't come back right away either. It actually took weeks before I slowly remembered the bus ride home and the walk we had taken together. Even then, there was still a huge empty space in my memory that I couldn't fill. The entire 5-hour period remained completely blank. No matter how hard I tried to think about it, there was nothing there. Eventually, I was taken to the hospital, where doctors kept me overnight for observation. They ran different tests, asked me questions, and tried to figure out what had happened. Surprisingly, every result came back normal. I hadn't suffered a seizure. I didn't have a concussion. There were no signs that I had been physically attacked. I had no serious injuries. From a medical standpoint, I appeared to be completely healthy. The doctors couldn't explain why I had been unconscious or why I had lost 5 hours of memory. The only lasting problem was that my short-term memory wasn't the same afterward. For several months, I struggled to remember recent conversations and simple everyday things. Eventually, my memory improved, but that missing block of time never returned. I've spent years thinking about what could have happened during those 5 hours. Did I faint? Did something happen that no one ever discovered? Did my brain somehow shut down for reasons doctors couldn't identify? I honestly don't know. I've considered every possible explanation I can think of, but none of them fully fit what happened. The location where I was found wasn't isolated. It was a busy road in broad daylight with passing cars, nearby businesses, and plenty of people around. It doesn't seem like the kind of place where someone could remain unnoticed for hours. Yet that's exactly what appears to have happened. Whenever I tell people this story, they usually try to come up with an explanation. Some think I must have had a medical episode that doctors somehow missed. Others suggest I was the victim of something I simply can't remember. A few people jump straight to paranormal theories. The truth is, I have no evidence to support any of those ideas. All I know are the facts. I walked toward a store that was only a short distance away. My roommate continued home without me. 5 hours disappeared from my life. I woke up surrounded by strangers. The hospital couldn't explain what had happened. My memory slowly returned, except for those missing hours. That gap has remained empty ever since, as unsettling as it is not knowing. I've reached a point where I've accepted that I may never get an answer. Some mysteries stay unsolved no matter how much time passes. Part of me has always wondered what happened during those lost hours, but another part of me feels that maybe it's better if I never find out. Whatever happened that day remains one of the biggest mysteries of my life. And after everything I've thought about over the years, I'm honestly not sure I want to know the truth. A few years ago, my husband and I were visiting some friends. They had invited us over to hang out for the afternoon, and since we had recently become parents, we brought our baby along with us. It was one of those relaxed weekends where nobody was in a hurry, and everyone was just enjoying each other's company. We had also brought our brand new stroller. Like most new parents, we were excited about every little baby item we bought. The stroller was one of our favorite purchases, and we were still getting used to using it. It folded differently than the older models, steered much more smoothly, and seemed packed with features we hadn't seen before. Our friends also had children, although theirs were a little older. As soon as my friend saw the stroller, she started laughing about how much baby gear had changed over the years. I swear they didn't make them like this when my kids were babies, she said. She wanted to take it for a quick test drive around the driveway and sidewalk just to see how it handled. None of us thought twice about it. It seemed like a harmless thing to do. While we were chatting outside, my husband and his friend had been working on one of our vehicles in the driveway. They were replacing the brakes, so the vehicle had been lifted off the ground using jacks. They'd been working on it for a while and seemed completely comfortable with what they were doing. From where I was standing, everything looked normal. The driveway was open. The tools were scattered nearby. The guys were focused on the repair. Meanwhile, my attention was completely on the baby and the stroller. Looking back now, I realize I wasn't paying nearly enough attention to what was happening around me. I wasn't thinking about the car. I wasn't thinking about the jacks. I wasn't thinking about what could possibly go wrong. To me, it was just another afternoon with friends. At some point, my friend started pushing the stroller down the sidewalk. She smiled as she steered it around, commenting on how easy it was to turn compared to the strollers she'd used years earlier. I walked beside her for a moment before drifting a few steps away. Without really thinking, we ended up walking behind our vehicle. The car was parked in the driveway with the rear facing the sidewalk. Because we were using the sidewalk behind it, it didn't even occur to me that we were passing behind a vehicle that was being held up by jacks. It seems so obvious now. At the time, it never crossed my mind. Everything happened in less than a second. There wasn't any warning. No loud cracking sound. No slow movement. One moment, the vehicle was sitting where it had been all afternoon. The next moment, there was a sudden metallic bang. The jacks gave way. The entire vehicle dropped. The sound was deafening. Metal slammed against concrete. Before anyone could react, the car rolled backward, straight toward the stroller. For a split second, my brain refused to process what I was seeing. Then I realized exactly where my baby was. Still strapped into the stroller. The car kept rolling. Someone shouted. I don't even remember who. Everything around me disappeared except for that stroller. People always talk about adrenaline, but until that moment, I never truly understood what it meant. It felt like time slowed down. Every tiny detail became crystal clear. I remember seeing the wheels of the stroller. I remember seeing the rear bumper of the vehicle moving closer. I remember hearing my own heartbeat pounding in my ears. Then, instinct completely took over. I didn't stop to think. I didn't make a plan. I just moved. I threw myself toward the stroller as fast as I could. At the same time, I reached out with one arm and pushed against the back of the vehicle with everything I had. To this day, I honestly don't know how I managed it. I'm not a particularly strong person. Under normal circumstances, there is absolutely no chance I could hold back an SUV. But in that moment, something happened. Pure adrenaline gave me strength I didn't know I had. With one arm braced against the vehicle, I grabbed my baby with the other. I wasn't thinking about lifting carefully. I wasn't thinking about buckles. I wasn't thinking about anything except getting my child out before the car rolled any farther. I pulled with everything I had. Somehow, I managed to rip my baby free from the stroller, just as the vehicle crushed into it. The stroller became trapped between our SUV and another parked car. The sound of metal hitting metal echoed through the driveway. Everything finally stopped moving. Then there was silence. For a second, nobody said anything. Everyone was frozen. I looked down at my baby. Safe, scared, crying, but alive. I hugged that little body tighter than I ever had before. My hands were shaking so badly I could barely hold on. My husband ran over immediately. His face had gone completely pale. Our friends looked just as shocked. Nobody could believe what had just happened. We all stood there, staring at the crushed stroller, trying to understand how close we had come to losing everything. If the vehicle had rolled just a little differently, if I had reacted even 1 second later, if my friend had been standing in another position, I don't even want to finish those thoughts. The stroller was completely pinned between the two vehicles. Looking at it afterward was terrifying. It was twisted, crushed, and bent out of shape. Seeing what had happened to it made me realize exactly how serious the accident had been. It wasn't a close call. It was unbelievably close. My baby should have been inside that stroller when it was crushed. Instead, somehow, I had managed to pull them out just in time. Even now, I can't fully explain how I did it. People sometimes ask if I really held the vehicle back. Honestly, I don't know. Maybe I only slowed it for a fraction of a second. Maybe it was just enough to buy myself the time I needed. Maybe the physics of the situation worked differently than I remember. Traumatic moments have a strange way of changing how memories feel. What I do know is that I remember pushing with everything I had while pulling my baby free at the exact same time. It felt impossible. But somehow, it happened. The emotional crash came afterward. Once the danger had passed, my body started trembling uncontrollably. The adrenaline disappeared almost as quickly as it had arrived. I realized how badly my knees were shaking. I couldn't stop crying. My husband hugged both of us while everyone else tried to make sense of what had happened. Our friends kept saying how sorry they were, even though none of us could have predicted the jacks would suddenly fail. It was simply one of those horrible accidents that happen without warning. Still, it's impossible not to replay the moment afterward. You think about every decision. Why did we walk behind the vehicle? Why didn't anyone move the stroller farther away? Why didn't we notice the danger? Those questions stayed in my mind for a long time. As parents, we spend so much energy trying to protect our children from obvious dangers. We install car seats correctly. We baby-proof our homes. We check temperatures before giving them a bath. We watch them every second around water. But sometimes, danger comes from somewhere you never expected. That day taught me how quickly an ordinary afternoon can turn into the most terrifying moment of your life. Thankfully, the story ended in the best possible way. Our baby wasn't seriously hurt. The stroller took the damage instead. And speaking of that stroller, I have to give credit where it's due. It was a Graco. After seeing what it went through, I came away with an entirely new respect for how well those strollers are built. The frame absorbed an incredible amount of force before finally giving way. Would I ever want to test that again? Absolutely not. But seeing the condition of the stroller afterward made me appreciate how solidly it had been made. Even though my baby had already been pulled free, knowing how much punishment that stroller absorbed gave me a strange sense of gratitude. Years have passed since that afternoon, but I still remember every second of it. Whenever I see someone working underneath a vehicle supported by jacks, I automatically make sure everyone stays well away from it. Whenever children are nearby, I'm extra careful about where they are standing. That experience changed the way I think about safety forever. More than anything, though, it reminded me of something people often say but rarely understand until they're tested. Parents are capable of extraordinary things when their children are in danger. I never imagined I could react that fast. I never imagined I could find that kind of strength. But when I saw that vehicle rolling toward my baby, instinct took over before fear had a chance to stop me. It's still the most terrifying moment I've ever lived through, and even now, every time I think back to that crushed stroller sitting between those two cars, I can't help but feel thankful that I was given just enough time to pull my child to safety. When I was about 8 months pregnant with my second child, my family had already been through a stressful few weeks. We had recently experienced a small fire at our house. Thankfully, no one was hurt, but the damage was enough that we had to file an insurance claim. The insurance company approved the claim, and we received money to replace things that had been damaged by the fire and smoke. Our carpets needed replacing. The walls needed fresh paint. And we also had to buy new curtains and a few other household items. It wasn't exactly the kind of shopping trip anyone looks forward to, but we were trying to make the best of it. At the time, it was just me, my then husband, and our 3-year-old child. I was heavily pregnant, tired most of the time, and ready for the whole process of repairing our home to be over. We drove to one of the large home improvement stores in our area, the kind that sells everything from lumber and tools to paint, flooring, and appliances. It was a normal day, and the parking lot was fairly busy. Nothing seemed unusual as we walked inside. Our plan was simple. We wanted to choose new paint colors and pick out replacement carpet for the house. We headed toward the paint department first, but as soon as we got there, we realized it was packed with people. Several customers were already looking through paint samples, employees were mixing colors behind the counter, and there wasn't much room to move around. Rather than wait, we decided to change our plans. We'll come back to the paint later, we said. Instead, we walked over to the carpet section. The flooring displays were much quieter, and we started looking through the large carpet samples, comparing colors and textures, while trying to imagine what would look best in our home. It felt like an ordinary afternoon. Our 3-year-old stayed close to us while we looked through the displays. I remember rubbing my pregnant belly from time to time because standing for long periods had become uncomfortable. We talked about what color would match the walls. We joked about finally putting the house back together after everything we'd already been through. Then everything changed. Without any warning, there was an explosion. It wasn't just loud. It was unbelievably loud. The sound echoed through the entire building with a force that I had never experienced before. For a split second, I honestly thought the store itself was collapsing. It sounded like entire rows of shelving had crashed to the ground at once. The blast was so powerful that it seemed to shake everything around us. People immediately stopped what they were doing. Nobody understood what had happened. For just a moment, there was complete confusion. Then came the smoke. From where we were standing, we could see dark smoke rising from somewhere near the paint department. A second later, we could smell it. It wasn't the familiar smell of fresh paint or chemicals. It smelled like fire. Almost immediately, the building's fire alarm started screaming. The loud siren echoed through every aisle. Employees began shouting directions. People started moving quickly. Someone yelled for everyone to head toward the nearest exit. The calm shopping trip disappeared in an instant. Customers abandoned shopping carts where they stood. People grabbed children, called for family members, and hurried toward the back of the store where employees were directing everyone outside. We joined the crowd. My husband stayed close beside me while making sure our 3-year-old didn't get separated from us. Being 8 months pregnant made moving quickly much harder than normal. I remember trying to keep up while everyone around us seemed to be rushing in every direction. There was a growing sense of panic in the air. Nobody knew exactly what had happened. Some people thought there had been an electrical explosion. Others were saying there was a fire. All we knew was that something was terribly wrong. As we made our way toward the rear exit, something happened that I will never forget for the rest of my life. A woman suddenly came running toward us. At first, my brain couldn't understand what I was seeing. Then it became horrifyingly clear. She was on fire. Actual flames were burning on her as she ran past us. She wasn't standing still. She wasn't rolling on the ground. She was running. The image is burned into my memory. For a moment, everything around me seemed to disappear except for that woman. People screamed. Some froze in shock. Others moved out of her way without even thinking. My husband reacted immediately. Without hesitating, he ran after her. As he took off, he shouted back at me, "Get out. Get outside." I watched him disappear into the chaos, while I stayed focused on getting myself and our 3-year-old safely out of the building. Those few moments felt endless. I had no idea where my husband was. I didn't know if he had reached the woman. I didn't know whether the fire was spreading. All I could think about was protecting my child and the baby I was carrying. Following the employee's directions, we continued toward the rear of the building. Finally, we reached what looked like an exit into the receiving area behind the store. For one brief second, I thought we were safe. Then, we discovered another problem. The receiving yard was surrounded by a security fence. The gate leading out to the front of the building was locked with a heavy padlock. We couldn't leave. Instead, dozens of frightened customers were trapped inside the fenced receiving area. Everyone stood there waiting. Employees were trying to locate someone who had the key. The fire alarms were still blaring behind us. Smoke was still visible over the building. People kept looking back toward the store. Some were crying. Some were trying to call family members. Others were simply standing in stunned silence. Those few minutes felt far longer than they probably were. When you're standing outside a building after hearing an explosion, separated from your husband, while 8 months pregnant and holding on to your young child, time seems to move incredibly slowly. I remember wondering where my husband was. Had he made it out? Was he still inside? Had he been hurt trying to help that woman? Every terrible possibility ran through my mind. Eventually, someone finally arrived with the key. The padlock was unlocked. The gate swung open. Everyone quickly moved around toward the front of the building, where emergency crews were already arriving. Police cars, fire trucks, ambulances, the entire area had transformed into an emergency scene. Thankfully, after what felt like forever, I found my husband. Seeing him safe was one of the biggest moments of relief I've ever experienced. We hugged, checked on our child, and tried to process everything we had just witnessed. The shopping trip was obviously over. We went home still trying to understand what had happened. Over the next few days, more information became public. The explosion hadn't been an accident. It wasn't caused by faulty equipment. It wasn't an electrical fire. Someone had intentionally planted a pipe bomb inside the paint department of the store. The device exploded while customers were shopping nearby. The woman we had seen running past us had been in the paint aisle when it detonated. She suffered devastating burns. We later learned that she spent a very long time in the hospital recovering from her injuries. She underwent multiple surgeries during her recovery. Hearing that made the entire experience even more heartbreaking. I couldn't stop thinking about how close we had come to being there ourselves. In fact, we almost were. Our original plan had been to start in the paint department. The only reason we weren't standing there when the bomb exploded was because the aisle had been too crowded. We had decided to look at carpet first instead. That simple decision changed everything. If the paint section had been less busy, if we had arrived just a few minutes earlier, if we had followed our original plan, there's a very real chance that my husband, my 3-year-old, my unborn baby, and I would have been standing only a few feet from the explosion. That thought stayed with me for years. It's strange how life can change based on one small decision that seems completely meaningless at the time. Choosing to walk down one aisle instead of another, waiting a few extra minutes, changing the order of your shopping list. You never imagined those tiny choices could save your life. After everything we'd already gone through with the fire at our own home, the experience felt almost unbelievable. We had gone to the store simply to replace things that had been damaged in one disaster. Instead, we found ourselves caught in another completely unexpected emergency. Even now, years later, I can still remember the sound of that explosion. I can still hear the fire alarms echoing through the building. I can still picture the smoke rising over the aisles. Most of all, I can still remember the woman running past us, engulfed in flames, and my husband chasing after her without stopping to think about his own safety. It's an image that never completely leaves you. Thankfully, my family made it out safely. We were incredibly fortunate. But every time I think back on that day, I'm reminded of how ordinary moments can become life-changing in a matter of seconds. We walked into that store expecting to spend the afternoon choosing paint colors and carpet samples for our home. Instead, we unknowingly came within minutes, and possibly only a few yards, of one of the most terrifying experiences of our lives. To this day, whenever I walk into a large store, I automatically notice where the exits are. I never used to think about things like that, but after living through an explosion, seeing smoke fill a building, becoming separated from my husband, and realizing how close my family came to being in the exact place where a bomb exploded, it's a habit that has never gone away. Some experiences change the way you see the world forever, and this was one of them. I used to live in a quiet little neighborhood where almost nothing ever happened. It was the kind of place where people kept their lawns clean, waved at each other from their driveways, and turned their porch lights off before midnight. Most nights were so still that you could hear a car coming from blocks away before it ever passed your house. During the day, it felt safe and normal. Kids rode bikes in the street. Older couples walked their dogs. Mailboxes stood in neat rows. Nothing about that neighborhood looked dangerous. Nothing about it made you feel like someone might be watching you after dark. But that house had one thing I never liked very much, even though I tried not to think about it too often. The living room had a large glass sliding door that looked straight into the backyard. It was one of those wide doors that went almost from the floor to the ceiling, with a metal frame and a simple lock near the handle. During the day, it let in a lot of light, and it made the room feel open. At night, it felt different. Once the sun went down, the glass turned black. You could no longer see the yard clearly. Instead, you saw your own reflection staring back at you from the dark surface. And behind that reflection was nothing but shadow. There was no curtain over that door, no blinds, no thick drape to pull shut when I wanted privacy. Whoever had lived there before me had never put anything up, and for some reason, I never got around to fixing it. At first, I told myself it did not matter. The backyard had a fence, and the neighborhood was quiet. I did not think anyone would be standing back there, looking in. Besides, I had cats, and they liked to move around the house at night. I got used to hearing small bumps and scratches and little sounds from outside or near the door. Most of the time, I blamed everything on them. I was a night person back then. I would often stay up late in the living room long after everyone else would have gone to bed. Sometimes I watched TV with the volume low. Sometimes I sat on the couch with my laptop. Other nights, I just scrolled through my phone in the dark while the rest of the house sat silent around me. The living room was comfortable, but it always had that large black glass door facing the backyard. I would be sitting there, half awake, with the glow of the TV or my phone lighting up my face, and that door would be right across the room like a huge dark mirror. Every now and then, I heard noises from the backyard. Little rustles, soft thumps, the sound of something moving near the fence. Sometimes it sounded like claws on the wooden deck or something brushing against the side of the house. When you live with cats, you learn to ignore a lot of sounds. My cats were always getting into something. They would jump on things, knock things over, scratch at doors, and chase each other around when the rest of the world was trying to sleep. So whenever I heard something outside, I told myself it was probably them. There was also a motion-sensing porch light by the back door. It was supposed to turn on if anything moved close enough to the house. At first, I thought that made me feel safer. If someone walked up to the door, the light would switch on, and I would know. But after a while, it became something I barely noticed. It would turn on sometimes in the middle of the night for no clear reason. I would glance toward the glass door and see the backyard suddenly washed in pale light for a few minutes. Then the light would click off again, and the yard would return to darkness. I always came up with normal reasons for it. Maybe a cat had walked past. Maybe a raccoon or some other nighttime animal had crossed the yard. Maybe the wind had moved a branch or blown something across the ground. I never wanted to think too deeply about it. It was easier to believe the light was just sensitive. It was easier to roll my eyes and go back to whatever I was doing. Still, there were nights when it made me uneasy. I would be sitting on the couch, relaxed but tired, and the porch light would flash on outside. The whole glass door would change from a black mirror into a bright view of the yard. For a second, I would stare, expecting to see one of my cats or maybe some animal near the steps. But most of the time, I saw nothing. Just the empty yard, the fence, a few shapes of bushes, and the back of my own house reflected in the glass. Then, the light would go off again. That should not have scared me as much as it did, but sometimes it did. The worst part was the few seconds after the light went off. The yard would become completely dark again, and I would suddenly be aware that if someone was out there, I could not see them anymore. But they could probably still see me. I would be sitting in a lit room right in front of a glass door with no curtain. To anyone outside, I would have been easy to see. They could watch me on the couch. They could see when I got up. They could see when I turned off the TV. They could know when I went to bed. I did not let myself stay scared for long. I always pushed the thought away. I would tell myself I was being dramatic. Nothing happened in that neighborhood. I had never had a break-in. I had never seen anyone strange in the yard. There were no obvious signs that anything was wrong. It was just a dark backyard and a light that came on sometimes. That was all. At least, that was what I believed for a while. One night it snowed. It was not a huge storm, but it was enough to cover everything with a clean white layer. The kind of snow that makes the world look calm and fresh in the morning. I remember waking up and looking outside, seeing the rooftops and yards covered in white. The street was quiet, and the whole neighborhood looked peaceful. Snow always has a way of making things feel softer, like it has covered up all the dirt and noise from the day before. I did not think anything was wrong when I first looked out. I probably made coffee or moved around the house the way I normally did. At some point, I went near the sliding glass door and looked into the backyard. That was when I saw them. Footprints, not animal tracks. Not small paw marks from my cats. Not the little scattered lines birds leave behind. These were shoe prints. Human shoe prints. They were clear in the snow, dark and pressed deep enough to show that someone had walked there after the snow had fallen. They came across the yard and led straight toward the glass sliding door. And then they stopped. They stopped right in front of the door. For a few seconds, I just stood there and stared. My brain did not accept what I was seeing right away. I kept looking at those prints, trying to find some harmless explanation. Maybe someone had come to the wrong house. Maybe a neighbor had needed something. Maybe it was a delivery person, even though no delivery would have come through the backyard in the middle of the night. Maybe it had happened early in the morning. Maybe there was some reason that made sense. But there was no reason for a person to be standing right in front of that glass door. The prints did not just pass by. They did not go across the yard toward the fence or around the side of the house. They came to the door and stopped there, like whoever made them had stood right outside, facing the glass, facing the living room, facing the couch where I had sat so many nights. I looked at the door handle. I looked at the lock. I looked back at the footprints. A cold feeling moved through me that had nothing to do with the snow outside. It was slow at first, almost like confusion, and then it became fear. Someone had been there. Someone had walked through my backyard during the night and stood directly outside my living room door. I tried to remember the night before. Had I been awake late? Had the porch light come on? Had I heard anything? I could not clearly remember. That was what made it worse. The nights had all started to feel the same. The same couch, the same glass door, the same little sounds outside, the same motion light clicking on and off. I had ignored so many things that I could not tell if this was new or if it had been happening for a long time. I stood there for a while, not moving, just staring at the prints. They felt like proof of something I had not wanted to believe. Before that morning, every noise had been easy to explain away. Every time the light turned on, I could blame an animal. Every time I felt uneasy about the dark glass, I could tell myself I was being silly. But those footprints were different. They were real. They were right there in the snow. They showed that a person had been standing outside my door while I was inside the house. I do not remember exactly what I did after that. I probably checked the rest of the doors and windows. I probably told myself it was a one-time thing. That was how I handled it at the time. I wanted it to be a one-time thing because the other possibility was too disturbing. If I admitted someone might have been coming into my backyard more than once, then I had to think about every strange noise I had ignored. I had to think about every time the porch light came on for no reason. I had to think about all the nights I sat in the living room with that big uncovered glass door in front of me. So I told myself someone had just wandered into the yard once. Maybe they were drunk. Maybe they were confused. Maybe they had been looking for a cat or a dog. Maybe they saw the house and walked up for some reason, then left. I wanted the story to end there. I wanted it to be a creepy thing that happened once and then went away. But it did not feel right. After that, I started paying more attention to the backyard. I noticed the porch light more often. I noticed the sounds more often. When the cats made noise, I would check to see where they were. If I heard something outside, but both cats were inside with me, I felt my stomach tighten. I started looking at the glass door differently. It was no longer just part of the house. It was a weak point. It was a window into my life. It was a place where someone had stood and watched. The worst part was that the door still had no curtain. At night, I began to feel exposed in my own living room. I would sit on the couch and feel like someone could be on the other side of the glass, hidden by the dark. I would see my reflection and wonder if there was another face behind it. Sometimes I would turn off the lights inside just to see out better. But then the room became too dark and quiet, and I would feel even more nervous. Other times I kept the lights on and tried not to look toward the door at all. A while later, something else happened that made me think about the footprints again. I noticed the lock on the sliding glass door looked slightly tampered with. It was not broken open, and the door had not been forced all the way. But something about it looked wrong. The metal around the lock did not sit the way I remembered. There were little marks near it, the kind of marks you might not notice unless you were already worried. It looked like someone had messed with it, or at least tried to. That was when the fear changed. The footprints had scared me because they showed someone had been outside. But the lock made it worse because it suggested that person might not have been content with just looking in. Someone may have tried to open the door. Someone may have stood in the dark right outside my living room and worked at the lock while I was somewhere inside the house. I remember staring at that lock and feeling a sick drop in my stomach. I kept thinking about how many nights I had sat there, alone, half asleep, with my phone in my hand. I thought about all the times I had heard noises and ignored them. I thought about the porch light turning on and me telling myself it was only an animal. I thought about the cats, how easy it had been to blame them for everything. And then I thought about the person who may have been outside, close enough to touch the glass. The thought that really scared me was not just that someone had been there one night. It was that I had no idea how many times they had been there. The snow had only shown me one visit because snow leaves evidence. On any normal night, there would have been no footprints. If the ground had been dry, I would never have known. Someone could have walked into my yard, stood at the door, watched the living room, tried the lock, and then walked away without leaving a sign. They could have done it before the snow. They could have done it after. They could have been coming back again and again whenever they wanted. That idea bothered me more than anything else. I had been living in that house, thinking I was safe, while someone may have been treating my backyard like a place they could visit. They may have known my routine. They may have known I stayed up late. They may have known I sat in the living room by myself. They may have watched me enough to know when I went to bed and when the lights went out. I do not like thinking about what might have happened if the lock had been weaker, or if I had left the door unlocked one night. Sliding doors are easy to forget. You close them, hear them click, and assume they are secure. But sometimes they are not. Sometimes the lock does not catch all the way. Sometimes a person who knows what they are doing can get them open. I had never been careful about it before. I had never checked it twice. I had never thought I needed to. After I noticed the lock, I became much more cautious. I checked the door constantly. I looked outside before sitting down at night. I paid attention to where the cats were, so I would not blame every sound on them. I started feeling uncomfortable in the living room after dark, which was strange because it had once been my favorite place in the house. It was where I relaxed. It was where I watched shows and wasted time and stayed up too late. But after those signs, the room felt different. It felt like a stage, and the glass door felt like the place where an unseen audience might be standing. Even when nothing happened, I could not fully relax. The backyard seemed too quiet. The dark corners seemed deeper. The porch light became less comforting and more alarming. Every time it clicked on, my whole body reacted. I would freeze and listen. I would stare at the glass, waiting to see movement. Most of the time, there was nothing. But after what I had seen, nothing did not make me feel better. It only made me wonder if someone had already stepped out of view. The memory of those footprints stayed with me. I can still picture them clearly. The clean snow, the straight path across the yard, the prints ending right in front of the door. Not beside it, not near it, right in front of it. Like someone had stopped there on purpose, like they had stood there and looked in. At the time, I tried to downplay it because I did not want to scare myself. I wanted to believe it was just one strange night. But now, looking back, I feel more disturbed than I did then. Writing it out makes it worse because I can see the whole pattern more clearly. The noises, the motion light, the uncovered glass door, the footprints, the tampered lock. Back then, each thing seemed separate. Each thing had its own excuse. But when I put them together, they feel connected. I do not know who it was. I never saw a face. I never caught anyone standing there. I never got the kind of answer that would make the story feel finished. Maybe it was a stranger passing through. Maybe it was someone from the neighborhood. Maybe it was a person who had noticed the house, noticed the glass door, and realized they could watch without being seen. I have no way to know. That is what makes it hard to shake. A ghost story scares you because of what might not be real. This scared me because it was real. Someone had left those prints. Someone had touched that lock. Someone had been close enough to my home to make me feel unsafe inside it. I used to think the scariest thing would be seeing someone outside the glass. But now, I think the scariest thing is never seeing them at all. It is not knowing how long they were there. It is not knowing how many times they came back. It is realizing that all those nights, while I sat in that living room with the lights on and the dark glass in front of me, someone could have been standing just a few feet away, watching quietly from the other side. My husband and I lived in a cheap apartment back when he was still my boyfriend. It was not the kind of place we wanted to stay in forever. It was more like the kind of place you take because you need somewhere to live right now. And you tell yourself it is only temporary. The rent was low, the lease was monthly, and that was the main reason we chose it. We were trying to save money and look for something better, somewhere safer, cleaner, and more comfortable. At the time, we kept telling ourselves we would not be there long. The apartment was not terrible during the day, but it never felt completely right either. It had that worn-out feeling cheap apartments sometimes have, where everything looks like it has been fixed too many times instead of properly replaced. The walls were thin, the carpet had old stains, and some parts of the place always seemed a little colder than they should have been. We could hear people walking outside, cars pulling in and out, and sometimes voices from other units. It was not a peaceful place, but it was what we could afford for the moment. The living room had a sliding glass door that opened out toward a small outdoor area. I never liked that door very much. Sliding glass doors are useful in the daytime because they let in light, but at night they can feel like a weak spot in the whole apartment. It was basically a large window from the floor up, and when the lights were on inside, the glass turned dark and reflective. You could see yourself in it, but you could not always see what was outside. Anyone standing outside in the dark could see into the apartment much better than we could see out. There was a tree outside near that sliding door. At night, if the wind moved the branches, shadows would shift across the glass and the wall. Sometimes it looked like something was passing by. Sometimes it looked like a person had moved just outside the corner of your eye. I knew it was probably just the tree, and most of the time I reminded myself of that. Still, there is something about shadows moving near a door at night that makes your mind pay attention, even when you are trying to stay calm. One night, my boyfriend and I were in the living room watching one of those ghost hunter shows. I do not remember exactly which one it was, but it was something like that. The kind of show where people walk around dark buildings with cameras, whispering about cold spots and strange sounds. It was not the scariest thing in the world, but when you watch that kind of stuff late at night in a cheap apartment, it can mess with your head. Every little noise suddenly feels bigger. Every shadow looks like it has meaning. We were sitting together in the living room, trying to relax. I was wide awake, but my boyfriend was starting to drift off. He had that half-asleep look, where his eyes were open 1 second and closed the next. He was still on the couch with me, but he was not really paying attention to the show anymore. I remember feeling a little annoyed because I wanted him to stay awake with me, but I also could not blame him. It was late, the apartment was quiet, and the glow from the TV made the whole room feel sleepy. I kept watching the show, but after a while I started noticing movement near the sliding glass door. Just small movements at first. A slight shift in the darkness. A shape that seemed to slide across the glass and then disappear. I told myself it was the tree outside. That was the easy answer. The wind was probably moving the branches, and the branches were making shadows. There was no reason to think anything else was happening. People see shapes in the dark all the time, especially when they are already watching scary shows. But even after I told myself that, I could not stop looking over there. The sliding door was off to the side of the living room, and every few seconds, my eyes kept moving back toward it. I would watch the TV, then look at the glass. Watch the TV again, then look back. The shadows still seemed to be moving, just enough to bother me. They did not move like normal tree branches anymore. They felt slower, more controlled, like something was shifting its weight, standing just beyond where the light from the room could reach. At first, I tried to act normal. I did not want to wake my boyfriend over shadows. I did not want him to laugh and tell me I was letting the show get to me. So I sat there quietly, forcing myself to breathe like everything was fine. But then I got the feeling. It came over me all at once. The hair on the back of my neck stood up. A chill ran down my spine so hard, it felt like cold water had been poured under my skin. My stomach dropped. It was not normal fear. It was not the kind of nervous feeling you get from a scary movie. It felt like my whole body suddenly knew something was wrong before my brain could explain why. It was that deep animal kind of fear, the kind that tells you to move, run, hide, scream, do something, because you are in danger. I remember sitting there frozen for a second. The TV was still on. The voices from the ghost show were still talking in the background. My boyfriend was still half asleep beside me. But the room felt different now. It felt like the air had changed. I could hear my own breathing. I could feel my heart starting to beat faster. Then I looked straight at the sliding glass door, and I saw him. There was a shape of a man standing outside. He was not close enough for me to see details clearly, but he was close enough that I knew exactly what I was looking at. It was not a tree. It was not a branch. It was not my imagination. It was a person, a man. He was standing in the darkness outside our sliding glass door, looking into our living room. For one terrible second, I could not move. My eyes locked onto him, and his eyes locked onto me. We made eye contact through the glass. I could not see his face clearly, but I knew he was looking right at me. There was no mistake about it. He was not passing by. He was not lost. He was not looking for an apartment number. He was standing there, watching us. The fear that went through me was so strong that I felt like I might die right there on the couch. My whole body went cold. I could not even scream at first. The man did not bang on the door. He did not try to open it in that moment. He did not run. He just stared like he had been caught and still did not feel any hurry. Then, slowly, he moved out of sight. That almost made it worse. He did not panic. He did not jump back like someone who had accidentally looked into the wrong apartment. He moved slowly, calmly, like he was deciding when to leave. He stepped out of my view, disappearing past the edge of the glass door. The moment he was gone, I snapped out of it and grabbed my boyfriend. I shook him hard, trying to wake him up. I was scared and whispering and talking too fast, trying to explain what I had just seen. I told him there was a man outside the door. I told him he had been standing there looking in. I told him we had made eye contact. My boyfriend was still half asleep at first. He blinked at me, confused and irritated, the way people are when they get pulled out of sleep suddenly. He looked toward the door, then back at me. He did not see anything right away. The man was already gone from view. My boyfriend told me my mind was messing with me because of the scary show we were watching. He said it was probably the tree or the shadows. He said I was scaring myself. I wanted to believe him. I really did. A part of me wanted him to be right, because that would mean I had not actually seen a strange man standing outside our apartment. It would mean the fear in my body was just from the show. It would mean we were safe. But before I could even argue with him, the man came back. He walked back into view and stood in front of the sliding glass door again. This time, my boyfriend saw him too. There was no more doubt, no more blaming the tree, no more scary show excuse. The man was standing there outside the glass, staring into our living room. He had left our sight and then returned, as if he wanted us to know he was still there, as if he wanted us to see him, as if he did not care that we knew. My boyfriend's whole attitude changed instantly. He sat up, fully awake now. His voice became serious, and he told me to call 911. There was no hesitation in him anymore. He had seen what I saw, and that made the fear feel even more real. Sometimes when you are scared alone, you can still wonder if your mind is playing tricks on you. But when someone else sees the same thing at the same time, that little bit of doubt disappears. I grabbed the phone and called 911 while my boyfriend jumped up and went for a knife. I remember my hands shaking so badly that it felt hard to hold the phone. My voice probably sounded panicked, because I was panicked. I told the dispatcher that there was a man outside our sliding glass door, watching us. I told them he had been there more than once. I told them my boyfriend had seen him too. While I was on the phone, my boyfriend took the knife and went after him. I know that was dangerous. Looking back, I wish he had not done that. At the time, everything happened so fast. He was angry and scared and protective, and his first reaction was to chase the man away before he could get inside. He ran out after him, leaving me inside with the phone pressed to my ear and my heart pounding so hard I could feel it in my throat. Those moments felt endless. I was listening to the dispatcher while also trying to hear what was happening outside. I kept looking at the sliding door, terrified the man would come back or that someone else would appear. The living room suddenly felt too open, too bright, too easy to see into. I hated that glass door. I hated the darkness beyond it. I hated the idea that someone had stood there and watched us while we had been sitting there like everything was normal. My boyfriend came back, but he did not catch the guy. The man had disappeared into the dark. That was one of the worst parts. He had been close enough to our door for us to see him, but once he stepped away, he was just gone. The area around the apartment had enough dark corners and paths that a person could slip away quickly, especially if they knew where they were going. The police came and looked around. I do not remember every detail of what happened that first time, because my mind was all over the place. I remember feeling embarrassed and terrified at the same time, like maybe the police would think we were overreacting because we had been watching a ghost show. But we were not overreacting. There had been a real person outside that door. My boyfriend had seen him too. After that night, I did not feel safe in the apartment anymore. Not that I had ever loved the place, but before that night it had still been our temporary home. After that, it felt like someone had crossed a line. The outside did not feel separate from the inside anymore. The sliding glass door no longer felt like a door. It felt like a thin sheet between us and whoever wanted to come in. I became more aware of every noise. If I heard footsteps outside, I froze. If the wind moved the tree, I watched the shadows carefully. If I was in the living room at night, I made sure I knew where my phone was. I checked the lock on the sliding door again and again. I tried to tell myself the man had been scared off and would not come back, but deep down, I did not really believe that. The reason I did not believe it was because of the way he had acted. He had not behaved like someone who accidentally wandered too close to a stranger's apartment. He had not acted drunk or confused. He had looked at me, moved away, and then come back. That second time bothered me more than anything. He knew we saw him. He knew I had woken my boyfriend, and still he returned to the door and stared at us. That did not feel random. That felt bold. It felt like someone testing us. For a while, we tried to move on because we had to. Life does not stop just because something terrifying happens. We still had work, bills, and a daughter to take care of. We were already looking for a better place. But after that night, the search became more serious. We did not want to stay there any longer than we had to. Then, it happened again. This time, I was home alone with our daughter. That is the part that still makes me feel sick when I think about it. It was one thing for it to happen when my boyfriend was there with me. It was terrifying, but at least I was not alone. The second time, I did not have him beside me. I had my child in the apartment, and I was the only adult there. That changes everything. Fear becomes sharper when you are not only scared for yourself. You start thinking about what you would do, where you would run, how you would protect your child if someone tried to get in. I do not remember if I was watching TV again or just moving around the apartment, but I remember that same feeling coming back, that horrible chill, that sense that something was wrong. I looked toward the sliding door, and there he was again, a man outside. Watching, I cannot say for sure that it was the exact same man, because I never saw enough detail to identify him clearly. But in my gut, I believed it was him. The same type of shape, the same feeling, the same way of standing there like he had no normal reason to be there. Whether it was the same person or not, someone was outside my apartment again, and this time my daughter was there with me. I called the police again. I did not wait. I did not try to talk myself out of it. I did not tell myself it might be a shadow or a tree branch. I knew better by then. I grabbed the phone and called. My body was shaking, but I did what I had to do. I stayed inside. I made sure the door was locked. I stayed alert, listening for any sound that might mean he was trying to get in. The police came and searched the area again. By the time they got there, the man was gone. That was how it always seemed to work. He appeared, scared us, and disappeared into the area before anyone could catch him. The officer checked around and told me the area was clear. But then he said something that scared me even more. He told me that whoever was doing this was most likely casing the place with bad intentions. Hearing that from a police officer made it feel official. It was not just my fear talking anymore. It was not just me being paranoid from watching scary shows. The officer believed this person was watching our apartment for a reason. Casing the place meant he might have been studying our routine, looking for weaknesses, checking when we were home, when we were alone, and how easy it would be to get inside. That idea stayed in my head and would not leave. I thought about the first night, when my boyfriend had almost been asleep. What if I had fallen asleep too? What if neither of us had noticed him? What if the door had been unlocked? What if he had been waiting for the right moment? I thought about being home alone with my daughter and how different that night could have been if he had tried the door instead of just standing there. After the officer said that, we knew we could not stay. We had already wanted to move, but now it was not just about finding a nicer place. It was about getting out before something worse happened. The apartment had always been temporary, but now it felt dangerous. Every night we stayed there felt like giving that person another chance to come back. We moved quickly after that. We did not wait around to see if it would happen a third time. We did not want to find out what his real plan was. Maybe he was only watching. Maybe he wanted to scare us. Maybe he was trying to figure out when to break in. Maybe he had something even worse in mind. I do not know. And honestly, I do not want to know. What I do know is that I will never forget the way he looked standing outside that glass door. I will never forget making eye contact with a stranger in the dark while I sat in what was supposed to be my own safe living room. I will never forget waking my boyfriend and having him dismiss it for just a few seconds before the man came back and proved I was not imagining anything. That part still bothers me the most. The man came back. He had already been seen, and he still returned to the door to stare at us again. That is not normal. That is not a mistake. That is not someone walking by. That is someone who knows they are frightening you and does it anyway. I have lived in other places since then, and I still do not like uncovered glass doors at night. If there is a sliding door, I want curtains. I want blinds. I want something between me and the dark outside. People talk about haunted houses and ghost stories, but there is a different kind of fear when the thing outside your door is not a ghost. It is a real person. A person who can watch, wait, learn your routine, and disappear before help arrives. We got out before anything worse happened, and I am thankful for that. But I still think about what the officer said. He was probably casing the place with bad intentions. That means the man outside our door may not have been there by accident. He may have been planning something. He may have been waiting for the right night. And if I had not looked at the door when I did, we might never have known he was there. Something very similar happened to me, and even now I still hate thinking about it too much. At the time, I used to tell myself I was just being paranoid. My boyfriend traveled a lot for work, so there were many nights when I was alone in the house. I never liked those nights. Some people enjoy having the house to themselves, but I was not one of them. The moment he left, every little noise sounded louder. The furnace kicking on made me jump. Branches tapping against the side of the house made my heart race. A car slowing down outside made me freeze and listen until it drove away. My boyfriend knew this about me, and he used to tease me for it. He did not do it in a mean way. It was more like his way of trying to make me laugh and not take my fear so seriously. Every time he packed his bag for another work trip, he would make some stupid joke about how I was going to spend the whole night thinking there was a dangerous man hiding in the backyard. He would say something like, "Don't worry. I'm sure the murderer who obviously lives back there won't bother you tonight." Sometimes he would add that the guy probably waited for him to leave every time, just to scare me. I would roll my eyes and tell him to stop, because he was making it worse. But he was not completely wrong about me being nervous. When he was gone, I really did get scared at every single sound. If I was in the living room and heard something outside, I would mute the TV and sit completely still. If the motion light came on in the backyard, I would tell myself it was probably an animal, but I still would not look out right away. I hated that feeling. The feeling that someone might be out there and I would not know until it was too late. The house itself was not in some abandoned area. It was a normal place, and most of the time, it felt safe enough. But at night, especially when I was alone, the back of the house always bothered me. The backyard felt too dark, too open, and too quiet. There was a back deck with a motion sensor light, and the kitchen had a window facing that deck. The kitchen sink was right under that window, so if you stood there washing a dish or getting a glass of water, you were facing straight outside. During the day, that window was harmless. You could see the deck, the yard, and whatever weather was passing through. But at night, if the inside lights were on, the glass became a dark mirror. You could see your own reflection, the cabinets behind you, and maybe a little bit of the deck if the porch light was on. If the porch light was off, the window was just a black square. Anyone outside in the dark would have had the better view. That always made me uneasy. But I tried not to let it control my life. I worked as a bartender back then, so coming home late was normal for me. I was used to driving home after midnight, tired, smelling like the bar, with my feet hurting and my mind still buzzing from the noise of people, music, and drinks being ordered all night. By the time I got home, I usually wanted nothing more than a hot shower, comfortable clothes, and a little background noise from the TV before bed. One night, my boyfriend was away for work again. I remember it clearly because it was snowing. Not just a few flakes, either. It was the kind of steady snowfall that makes everything outside look quiet and soft. When I drove home that night, the roads were already covered in a thin layer of white, and the streetlights made the snow look almost silver as it came down. It was around 1 a.m. when I got back from work. The whole neighborhood seemed asleep. No one was outside. No one was shoveling yet. No cars were moving. It was just me pulling into the driveway, exhausted after my shift. I got out of the car and hurried inside, trying not to slip on the snow. The cold hit my face so hard that I remember feeling relieved as soon as I locked the door behind me. I was tired and I smelled like the bar, so the first thing I did was take a shower. I wanted to wash off the whole night. After that, I changed into something comfortable and went into the living room. I turned on the TV, not because I was really watching anything, but because I needed sound in the house. When I was alone, silence made me uncomfortable. If the TV was on, I could pretend the house was not empty. I could hear voices and feel like there was some kind of normal life around me. I kept the volume low enough not to be annoying, but loud enough to cover the little creaks and pops that houses make at night. The snow was still falling outside. I could feel how still everything was. Snow has a strange way of making the world quiet. It muffles footsteps, softens sound, and makes the air feel heavy. That night, the house felt even more silent than usual, even with the TV on. I was moving around the living room and kitchen, probably getting a drink or just settling down, when the motion sensor on the back porch suddenly went off. The light on the back deck turned on. That alone was enough to make me stop. My body reacted before my mind did. I froze for a second, listening. I told myself it could be anything. Maybe the wind had moved something. Maybe an animal had come onto the deck. Maybe falling snow had triggered the sensor somehow. I wanted it to be something normal. I needed it to be something normal. But then I looked toward the kitchen window, and there was a man standing there. He was right outside the window that faced the kitchen sink, just standing there, looking at me. For a second, I could not understand what I was seeing. My brain tried to turn him into something else. A reflection, a shadow, a tree, some shape made by the porch light and the snow. But he was too real. He was shaped like a person, standing close enough to the window that I knew without any doubt that there was a man on my back deck in the middle of the night. He was not walking past. He was not lost. He was not knocking on the door for help. He was just standing at the window and staring in at me. The porch light made him visible, but not clear enough for me to see every detail of his face. That almost made it worse. I could see enough to know he was a man, enough to know he was looking directly at me, but not enough to understand who he was or what he wanted. The snow was falling behind him, and the light from the deck made the whole scene feel unreal, like something from a nightmare that had somehow stepped into my real life. I did not scream. I did not run. I did not even look away. I think some part of me knew that if I broke eye contact, I might lose track of him. I did not want to turn my back. I did not want to give him even 1 second where I could not see what he was doing. My whole body went cold, but my mind became strangely focused. I stared at him through the window, and he stared back. I slowly reached for my phone. I did not make any sudden move. I did not want to panic him. I did not want him to try the door or disappear before I could get help. I just picked up my phone while keeping my eyes locked on him, and I called 911. It is hard to explain what that moment felt like. The TV was still on in the living room, playing something meaningless in the background. The house was warm, but I felt freezing. The kitchen light was on. The snow outside was falling so quietly, and a man I did not know was standing on my back deck, staring at me through my kitchen window at 1 a.m. When the dispatcher answered, I tried to keep my voice steady, but I was terrified. I told them there was a man outside my kitchen window. I told them I was home alone. I told them he was on my back deck and that I did not know him. I kept watching him while I spoke, afraid that if I blinked too long, he would move. I do not remember every word from that call. I remember the feeling more than the details. My fingers were tight around the phone. My heart was beating so hard that I could feel it in my chest and throat. I was trying to answer questions while also thinking about all the doors and windows in the house. Were they locked? Could he get in? Was there another person with him? Had he been watching me come home? Did he know my boyfriend was gone? That last thought hit me hard. My boyfriend always joked that some dangerous guy lived in the backyard and waited until he left. It had been a joke. A stupid joke we both knew was ridiculous. But in that moment, with a real man standing outside my kitchen window while my boyfriend was away, the joke did not feel funny anymore. It felt like the worst kind of bad luck, like something I had been afraid of had finally stepped out of my imagination and into the snow. The man did not break the window. He did not yell. He did not pound on the glass. He just stood there and looked at me, and that was horrible enough. There is something deeply wrong about a person who can stand outside a stranger's house at 1 a.m. and stare through their window like that. A normal person would leave once they realized they had been seen. A normal person would wave, explain, knock on the door, or step away. He did none of those things. I stayed on the phone until the police arrived. They came quickly, but it still felt like forever. Every minute stretched out. I kept thinking he was going to move. I kept waiting for him to step toward a door, or disappear into the dark, or do something that would force me to react. I did not know if I should hide, run to another room, grab something to protect myself, or stay where I could see him. Everything felt dangerous. If I stayed visible, he could watch me. If I moved away, I would not know where he went. When the police got there, they came in through the front door. I was so relieved to see them that I could have cried. Having other people inside the house, especially police officers, made the air feel different. The house no longer felt like a trap. It felt like there was at least some protection between me and whatever was outside. The officers went through the house and toward the back deck. By then, the man was gone. Of course he was gone. People like that seem to vanish the moment someone else shows up. The officers went outside and checked around the back of the house. The snow made everything easier to read. If someone had been back there, there would be evidence. And there was. There were footprints in the snow leading right up to that kitchen window. They were not old tracks. They were not random prints from earlier in the day. The snow had been falling, and the prints were fresh. They went straight to the window, exactly where I had seen him standing. That was the proof that made the whole thing impossible to dismiss. I had not imagined it. It had not been a shadow or my paranoia. A man had really walked through the snow, onto my back deck, and up to the window where he could look directly into my kitchen. The officers checked the area, but they did not find him. I do not know where he went or how far he got before they arrived. Maybe he ran as soon as he realized I was calling for help. Maybe he had already planned his way out. Maybe he knew the yard or the nearby streets well enough to disappear quickly. All I knew was that he had been there, close enough to watch me, and then he was gone. I did not stay in that house that night. There was no way. Even after the police left, even after they told me they had checked the area, I could not make myself sleep there alone. The house felt wrong. Every window felt exposed. Every dark corner outside felt like it could be hiding him. I kept looking at the kitchen window, seeing the place where he had stood. The porch light was still there. The deck was still there. The snow was still marked with his footprints. I could not pretend everything was normal. I went to my boyfriend's parents' house and stayed there until he came home. I did not care if it seemed dramatic. I was not going to sleep alone in that house after seeing a man standing at my kitchen window in the middle of the night. I needed to be somewhere with people, somewhere I could close my eyes without imagining him outside the glass. When my boyfriend got back and heard everything, the joking stopped. He did not tease me about being paranoid anymore. He knew this had been real. He saw how scared I was, and he knew the police had found footprints. It was no longer a funny story about me hearing noises and thinking someone was in the yard. Someone had actually been in the yard. Someone had actually come onto the back deck and watched me through the window. After that, my boyfriend insisted that I get my pistol permit. He wanted me to be able to protect myself if I was ever alone again, and something like that happened. He also got me a gun, and for extra peace of mind, he got me a huge dog. That dog's name was Tim, and Tim was the best boy. He was big enough to make a stranger think twice, but he was also sweet and loyal in the way only a good dog can be. Having him in the house changed everything. He made me feel safer in a way nothing else did. A lock is helpful, but it does not bark. A light is helpful, but it does not stand between you and the door. Tim listened to sounds I could not hear. He noticed movement before I did. When he was nearby, I did not feel as alone. Even with Tim, though, the memory never fully left me. I still think about that night when it snows. I think about coming home at 1 a.m, tired from work, not knowing anyone might be outside. I think about how the motion light came on and revealed him. I think about what might have happened if the light had not turned on. Would I have walked into the kitchen and stood at the sink with him watching me from the dark? Would he have stayed hidden longer? Had he been there before that night and I just never knew? That is the part that stays with me most. I only saw him because the motion sensor caught him. Without that light, he could have been just another shape in the dark. Without the snow, there might not have been footprints. Without the footprints, maybe some part of me would have wondered if I had imagined it. But the snow showed the truth. It showed his path. It showed that he had walked right up to the window. People always say you are paranoid until something proves you were right to be scared. Before that night, I felt silly for jumping at every noise. I felt like I was overreacting whenever my boyfriend left for work and I got nervous being alone. But after that, I stopped apologizing for trusting my fear. That feeling in your body, the chill down your spine, the sudden sense that something is wrong, it exists for a reason. I do not know who that man was. I do not know what he wanted. Maybe he was looking for a way in. Maybe he was watching to see if I was alone. Maybe he had followed me home from work. Maybe he had noticed my boyfriend was gone. Maybe it was random, and I was just unlucky that night. I will never know. But I know what I saw. I saw a man standing outside my kitchen window at 1 in the morning, staring at me while snow fell around him. And I know what the police saw. They saw his footprints leading right up to the glass. Many years ago, when I was still in high school, I had one of those nights that stayed in my mind forever, even though I was not the one who saw the danger first. I was just home alone, staying up way too late like a normal teenager, playing video games in the living room. At that age, being alone in the house did not really scare me. I thought I was old enough to handle it. I had stayed home by myself before, and nothing bad had ever happened. My parents were out at a friend's house, and I knew they would come back late, so I was not worried. The house was quiet, except for the sound of the game. I remember the glow of the TV lighting up the room, while the rest of the house sat dark around me. I was probably sitting too close to the screen, focused on whatever mission or match I was playing, not thinking about anything serious. Outside, the neighborhood was calm and asleep. It was the kind of suburban area where most people went to bed early, garage doors were shut, porch lights were left on, and the streets became empty after midnight. By the time it got close to 3 in the morning, I was still awake. That was not unusual for me back then, especially on a weekend or a night when I did not have to get up early. My parents had not come home yet, but I was not too concerned. They had gone to visit friends who lived pretty far away, so I knew the drive back would take time. I figured they were just talking late, losing track of time, the way adults do when they visit people they have known for years. Then, around 3 in the morning, I heard them arrive. At first, I did not think much of it. I heard the familiar sound of their car outside, then the front door opening. Normally, when they came home late, they would be tired, but relaxed. My mom might say something about how late it was. My dad might lock the door and ask why I was still awake. It would be normal, ordinary, forgettable. But this time, the moment they walked in, I could tell something was wrong. Their faces were different. Their whole energy was different. They were not just tired from the drive. My dad looked alert, serious, and almost tense, like he had been holding himself together for a while. My mom looked shaken too, but in a way that made me think she had only just fully understood what had happened. The room suddenly felt different. The game on the TV was still running, but I stopped paying attention to it. I asked what was going on. My dad told me that on the way back from their friend's house, he had noticed a car following them. At first, I did not really understand how serious he meant it. Cars follow other cars all the time on the road. People go in the same direction. People take the same exits. People end up behind you for several miles, especially late at night when there are fewer cars around. But the way my dad said it made it clear this was not just some random car traveling the same route. He had noticed it from far away, long before they reached our neighborhood. My mom had not noticed it first because she was the passenger, probably tired and not watching the road the same way he was. But my dad was driving, and drivers notice patterns. He had seen the same car behind them again and again. It stayed with them through different roads, different turns, and long stretches of driving. At some point, he realized it was not a coincidence. My parents had been coming back from their friend's house in Oxnard, California, that was roughly 80 miles north of where we lived at the time. So this was not a situation where someone followed them for 2 or 3 streets by accident. They had a long drive home, and my dad believed the car started following them around the Thousand Oaks area. That was still about 60 miles from our house. The reason my dad remembered it so clearly was because the car had a strange detail that caught his eye. One of the headlights looked different from the other. He said one was dimmer or had a different kind of brightness than the other one. It was the kind of small thing most people would ignore at first, but once you notice it, you start recognizing the same car in your mirror. The mismatched headlights made that vehicle stand out, even in the dark. For a while, my dad kept driving and watching carefully. He did not want to scare my mom right away. He did not want to overreact if it really was just a coincidence. But the longer they drove, the more obvious it became. That car was still there. It stayed behind them for mile after mile. If my dad changed lanes, it stayed with them. If traffic shifted, it remained behind. When there are only a few cars on the road late at night, you notice these things more. My mom did not know what was happening at first. She probably thought the drive was normal. Maybe she was looking out the window. Maybe she was tired and half quiet. But my dad was watching the rearview mirror, paying attention in a way he had probably learned from years of driving. He was not panicking. That is one of the things I respect most when I think back on it. He did not let fear control him. He stayed calm enough to think. By the time they got close to our area, he was sure something was wrong. Our house was in the suburbs, and getting to it was not as simple as staying on one straight road. You had to turn off the main streets and make your way through the neighborhood. There were several turns, side streets, and residential roads. A random car would not normally follow you through all of that unless it had a reason to be there. My dad decided to test it without saying much at first. He drove toward our street, but instead of turning into our driveway or stopping in front of the house, he kept going. That was when my mom finally asked him what he was doing. She knew they had reached the house. She knew he had just passed it. To her, it probably seemed strange, maybe even annoying, because it was late and they were tired. But my dad did not stop. He kept driving, and sure enough, the car behind them kept following. That was the moment my mom understood. My dad drove through the neighborhood, making turns that no stranger would need to make unless they were following him. The car stayed behind them. It did not turn off. It did not keep going on its own path. It followed them through the residential streets, deeper into the neighborhood, proving that my dad's fear was real. I can only imagine what that must have felt like for them. It was 3 a.m. They were almost home. They were tired from a long drive, and instead of being able to pull into the driveway, open the garage, and go inside, they had to keep moving because some unknown person was following them through the dark streets. My dad did the smartest thing he could have done. He did not lead the car to our house. He did not open the garage door. He did not stop and try to confront them. He drove to the police station. And as soon as he did that, the car turned away. That was all the confirmation he needed. The car had followed them for a long time, through highways, roads, and finally into our neighborhood. But when my dad headed toward the police station, the driver suddenly decided to leave. That does not sound like harmless behavior. That does not sound like someone who just happened to be going the same direction. If the person had no bad intention, why leave right when the police station came into the picture? When my dad told me all this, I felt a cold fear settle in my stomach. I had been sitting at home, safe and unaware, playing video games like nothing was happening. Meanwhile, my parents had been out there dealing with something that could have turned dangerous very quickly. I kept thinking about how easily the night could have gone a different way. What if my dad had not been paying attention? What if he had dismissed the feeling and assumed the car was just another driver going the same direction? What if he had pulled into our driveway like normal? The thought that bothered me the most was the garage. Like many suburban homes, our house had a garage that opened toward the street. Normally, when my parents came home late, they would press the button. The garage door would rise. and they would pull the car inside. For a short time, the garage would be open, and the house would be vulnerable. If a car with people inside had followed them right up to the house, those people would have seen exactly where we lived. They could have pulled in behind them. They could have blocked the driveway. They could have rushed the garage before it closed. They could have forced their way inside. That idea still bothers me to this day. A garage feels safe because it is attached to your home, but for those few seconds when it is opening and closing, it can also be a trap. If you are not aware of what is behind you, you might lead danger straight to your own door without realizing it. My parents could have opened that garage with a strange car right behind them, and by then, it might have been too late to do anything. My dad's awareness probably prevented something from happening. I do not know what the people in that car wanted. No one does. Maybe they planned to rob them. Maybe they wanted to follow them home and break in later. Maybe they were looking for an easy target. Maybe they thought a tired couple coming home late would not notice them. Maybe there were multiple people in the car. Maybe it was one person. We never found out. But the unknown does not make it less scary. Sometimes it makes it worse. For years after that, I thought about the timing. My parents had driven a long way from Oxnard, and my dad believed the car had been behind them since around Thousand Oaks. That means this was not a 5-minute prank. This was around 60 miles of following a random car in the middle of the night. Some people might say it could have been teenagers messing around, or someone trying to be funny, but I have never found that explanation comforting. A harmless prank that involves following a random vehicle for 60 miles past midnight does not sound harmless to me. If it really was some group of teenagers with nothing better to do, then that is still disturbing in its own way. But the more likely possibility is that whoever was in that car had a reason for staying behind my parents for so long. And that reason was probably not good. When I have shared this story before, I have been surprised by how many people had similar experiences. So many people have stories about being followed in cars, especially late at night. Some people noticed it and drove to a police station. Some people called someone while driving. Some people made extra turns to confirm it. Some people were not so sure until the car followed them into their neighborhood. It is scary how common that kind of thing can be, and how quickly it can turn from maybe I'm imagining it to this person is definitely following me. I have also been surprised by the number of people who try to brush it off as a prank or a misunderstanding. I understand that not every strange event has a criminal explanation. Sometimes people do end up driving the same way by chance. Sometimes someone takes the same exit, the same turn, and even ends up near the same neighborhood. But when someone follows you for that kind of distance, then keeps following you through suburban turns, and only leaves when you head toward the police station, it is hard to believe it was innocent. That night changed the way I think about driving. Before that, I did not pay much attention to what was behind me. I was a teenager. When I later started driving more, I probably would have focused mostly on what was in front of me, like most new drivers do. But after hearing what happened to my parents, I learned that awareness is not just about staying in your lane or stopping at red lights. It is also about knowing what is around you. It is about noticing patterns. It is about listening to that feeling in your gut when something does not seem right. Now, if I am driving at night and I notice the same car behind me for a long time, I pay attention. I do not panic, but I pay attention. If I am close to home and something feels wrong, I do not pull into my driveway right away. I make extra turns. I go somewhere public. I look for a police station, a gas station, or a well-lit place with people. I would rather feel silly for being cautious than ignore the feeling and lead someone straight to where I live. That was the lesson my dad taught me without meaning to. He showed me that staying calm and aware can make all the difference. He did not need proof before he acted. He did not wait until the car pulled into our driveway. He trusted what he was seeing, made a smart choice, and kept my mom and our home safe. I still think about how normal that night felt from my side. I was just a kid in the living room, staying up late with a video game, probably annoyed if I lost a level or had to restart something. I had no idea my parents were being followed. I had no idea my dad was checking the mirror, testing the car behind him, and making the decision not to come home until he knew it was safe. By the time they walked in, the danger had already passed, but the fear was still all over their faces. That is what made it real to me. My parents were not the type to make up drama. My dad was not someone who scared easily. If he came home looking serious and said a car had followed them, I believed him. And when he explained how far it had followed them and how it turned away near the police station, I understood why he had been shaken. We never found out who was in that car. We never learned what they wanted. There was no ending where police caught someone and gave us an explanation. It was just one of those events that happens, scares you, and then disappears into the past, leaving behind only a lesson and a bad feeling. But that bad feeling stayed with me. It stayed with me because there are so many moments in life where one small decision can change everything. My dad noticed mismatched headlights. He remembered the car. He watched it. He drove past the house instead of stopping. He made extra turns. He went to the police station. Each of those choices mattered. If he had ignored his instincts at any step, that night might have ended very differently. My parents made it home safely because my dad stayed aware. But whenever I picture that car following them through the dark neighborhood, I still feel uneasy. I imagine the garage door opening. I imagine the car stopping behind them. I imagine my parents realizing too late that the driver had followed them all the way home. I imagine myself inside, still playing video games, not knowing anything was wrong until it was already at our door. That thought is why I still check my mirrors. That thought is why I never ignore a car that seems to stay behind me for too long. And that thought is why I believe everyone should stay aware while driving, especially late at night. It is not about living in fear. It is about understanding that sometimes your instincts notice danger before you have proof. My dad listened to his, and because of that, what could have become a terrible story ended with my parents safe inside the house. Still, even after all these years, I cannot help wondering what would have happened if he had not. There is a guy somewhere near where I live, and the police are looking for him right now. I wish I could say this was one of those stories where people were exaggerating, or where the details got twisted because of rumors going around the neighborhood. But from what has been shared, this really happened, and the more you think about it, the worse it gets. It started with a woman coming home and realizing that someone had been inside her house. That alone is already enough to shake anyone. Your home is supposed to be the one place where you can shut the door and feel safe. You can deal with strange people outside. You can avoid dark streets. You can lock your car. You can be careful when you are out in public. But once you are inside your own home, you are supposed to be able to breathe. You are supposed to be able to sleep, change clothes, shower, and live without wondering if someone is watching you. But for this woman, that feeling was taken away. Someone broke into her house while she was not there. It was not just a quick break-in where someone grabbed electronics, money, jewelry, or anything valuable they could find before running away. That would still be awful, of course, but this was different. This was much more personal. Whoever entered that house did not seem like he was only there to steal. He had time. He moved through her space. He went through her belongings. He touched things that belonged to her. He entered the room where she slept and made it clear that he had been there for reasons that were disturbing and threatening. He went through her things in a way that felt deliberate, not random, not rushed. It was like he wanted to know her, or worse, like he already thought he did. He searched through her private belongings, the kind of things no stranger should ever touch. Drawers, clothes, personal items, whatever he could get his hands on. Imagine coming home and seeing that. Imagine walking into your room and realizing that a stranger had opened the things you keep closed, moved the things you keep private, and invaded the parts of your life that are not meant for anyone else. Then it got worse. He did something disgusting on her bed. He made the crime feel not only like a break-in, but like a direct violation of her personal space. Her bed was not just furniture. It was where she slept, where she rested, where she was supposed to feel safe at the end of the day. He chose that place on purpose. It was not an accident. It was not something he did without thinking. He wanted to leave behind proof that he had been there. He wanted her to know exactly what he had done in the room where she slept. He also stole her underwear. That detail is one of the most chilling parts to me because it shows this was not just about theft. He did not go in looking for money. He did not just break a window, grab a laptop, and leave. He took something personal, something intimate, something that connected the crime directly to her. It makes the whole thing feel like he was focused on her specifically, not just the house. And then he left Polaroid pictures spread around the room. They were obscene pictures of himself. He left them where she would find them, like he wanted to shock her, scare her, and make sure she knew the kind of person who had been in her room. That detail makes my skin crawl. It is one thing for someone to break in and disappear. It is another thing for them to leave proof in such a sick, bold way. It feels like he wanted attention. He wanted control. He wanted her to feel afraid even after he was gone. But the worst part was the note. He left her a note saying he was coming back while she was home. That is the kind of thing that turns a horrible crime into a nightmare that does not end when the police leave. Because after reading something like that, how could she ever feel safe again? How could she sleep in that room? How could she sit in her house at night and not listen to every sound? How could she hear a car outside, a floorboard creak, or a branch tap the window without wondering if he had returned? A break-in is already terrifying, but a threat to come back is a different level of fear. It means the person wants you to keep thinking about him. He wants to live inside your head. He wants you to wonder when he will show up again. He wants you to feel hunted inside your own home. The police said they believe it is probably not someone she knows. That almost makes it worse in a different way. If it were someone she knew, at least there might be a reason, a connection, a direction for the investigation. It would still be horrible, but there would be some kind of explanation. But the idea that this could be a stranger is deeply unsettling. A stranger who chose her. A stranger who knew which room was hers. A stranger who had been watching enough to understand her life from the outside. She has a female roommate, and this is the detail I cannot stop thinking about. He did not go into the roommate's room. He went only into her room. That means he either knew exactly which room belonged to her, or he had been watching the house long enough to figure it out. He may have seen her lights turn on and off. He may have watched which window she appeared in. He may have watched when she came home, when she left, and which part of the house she used most. He may have seen her through the windows. He may have sat somewhere nearby and studied the house like it was nothing. That thought is terrifying. Most people think of danger as something sudden. A stranger jumps out. Someone follows you in a parking lot. A person breaks in during the night. But sometimes the scariest danger is quiet. It builds slowly. Someone watches. Someone learns your routine. Someone figures out when you are alone, which car is yours, which window is your bedroom, and when the house is empty. You do not know it is happening because your life feels normal. You go to work, come home, make dinner, shower, sleep, and repeat the next day. Meanwhile, someone may be paying attention to all of it. That is what makes this case so creepy. It does not feel random. It feels planned. It feels like he had been waiting for the right time to get inside. He knew enough to go into the right room and ignore the other one. That does not sound like someone who just stumbled into a house and picked a door by chance. That sounds like someone who had already decided who his target was. I keep imagining what it must have been like for her to come home and find the room like that. Maybe she first noticed something small. Maybe the door looked wrong. Maybe a drawer was open. Maybe something was moved. At first, she might have thought the roommate had gone into her room for some reason. Or maybe she thought she had left things messy and forgotten. That happens sometimes. When something is off in your home, your brain tries to explain it in a normal way first. You do not want to believe a stranger has been inside. But then, she would have seen more. Things opened. Belongings moved. Personal items missing. The bed violated. The pictures. The note. There are certain moments when your mind catches up all at once, and I think finding that note must have been one of them. Before the note, she might have been scared about what had already happened. After the note, she had to be scared about what might happen next. The danger was no longer in the past. It was promised for the future. I cannot imagine how hard it would be to stay in that house after that. Every part of the room would feel contaminated by his presence. The bed would not feel like her bed anymore. The drawers would not feel private. The windows would not feel harmless. Even the walls would feel like they had failed to protect her. A home can become a scary place very quickly when you know someone has already crossed the boundary once. And it was not just her room he invaded. He invaded her peace of mind. He made it so she had to question every normal thing. Did he watch her from the street? Did he know her schedule? Did he know when her roommate was gone? Did he know when she was alone? Did he live nearby? Had she passed him before without knowing? Had he ever smiled at her in a store? Had he ever been in a car parked near the house? Had she ever seen him and not realized he was watching? Those questions are the kind that can drive a person crazy because there are no answers at first. Until the police find him, all she can do is wonder. The whole thing has made people around here nervous. It is one thing to hear about crimes in faraway places on the news. You feel bad, but there is still distance. It is different when it happens near you. Suddenly, the streets you drive on feel different. The houses you pass do not look as safe. The people walking by do not feel as invisible. You start looking at cars parked too long in one spot. You start checking your locks twice. You start pulling your curtains closed earlier. And honestly, I think people should be nervous. Not in a way that makes them panic and stop living, but in a way that makes them pay attention. Because someone like that does not just wake up one day and commit a crime like this out of nowhere. A person who breaks into a woman's room, goes through her belongings, steals personal clothing, leaves obscene pictures, and writes a threat saying he will come back is not harmless. That is someone who has crossed many lines already. That is someone who may be building up to something worse. The police saying he likely does not know her also means anyone could be at risk, especially if he is still nearby. Maybe he is focused on her. Maybe he has watched others too. Maybe this is the first time he has done something this bold, or maybe it is just the first time he has been noticed. That is the part nobody likes to say out loud. Sometimes people who do things like this test boundaries. They watch first. Then they trespass. Then they break in. Then they leave things behind. Each step becomes more serious. Each step shows they are willing to take more risk. I do not know what his plan was, and I hope police catch him before anyone has to find out. Because the note is not something to ignore. Saying he would come back while she was home is a direct threat. That is not just creepy behavior. That is not just some disturbed person trying to shock someone. That is a warning. He wanted her to imagine him returning when she was there. He wanted her to picture the door opening, the window breaking, or footsteps coming down the hall while she was inside. That kind of fear is cruel. I think about her roommate, too. The roommate must feel scared as well. Even if he did not target her room, he still broke into the house where she lives. She has to live with the knowledge that someone was inside their home, walking around, choosing one room and leaving the other. She may feel lucky that he did not go into her room, but lucky is not the same as safe. If he came back, who knows what would happen? The detail about him only going into one room tells you how focused he was. He did not come in for random chaos. He had a target. That is what makes him feel more dangerous. Random can be terrifying, but targeted is a different kind of nightmare. Targeted means someone has already made choices about you without your knowledge. They have decided you matter to them in some twisted way, and you may not even know their face. This whole thing makes me think differently about windows. A bedroom window with a light on at night can show more than people realize. Curtains left open can reveal routines. Someone outside can learn where you sleep, when you turn off the light, whether you live with someone, whether you have a dog, whether you come home late, whether you are alone. Most of us do not think about that every day because we should not have to. We should be able to exist in our homes without feeling watched. But stories like this remind you that not everyone outside is just passing by. Some people are looking. Some people are remembering. Some people are waiting for the right chance. I hope she is somewhere safe now. I hope she has people around her. I hope the police are taking it seriously, because everything about this sounds like a person who could come back. I hope her locks have been changed, her windows secured, and cameras put up around the house. I hope neighbors are watching out for each other. I hope anyone nearby who saw a strange car, a person walking around, or someone acting odd reports it. Most of all, I hope they catch him. Because whoever he is, he did not just break into a house. He broke into someone's life. He made a stranger's bedroom into a crime scene. He stole her sense of safety. He left behind fear on purpose. And then he promised to return. That is what makes it so disturbing. It is not just what he did while she was gone. It is the fact that he wanted her to know he was not finished. And somewhere out there, until the police find him, he may still be watching. 9. When I was younger, around 14 or 15 years old, my family used to go camping at a state park. It was one of those places that felt peaceful during the day, but completely different after dark. In the daytime, the campground was full of normal sounds. People were talking around picnic tables. Kids were riding bikes on the gravel roads. Parents were setting up tents. And you could smell campfire smoke drifting through the trees. It felt safe because there were people everywhere. Even if you walked a little ways from your campsite, you could still hear voices or see smoke from someone's fire. But at night, the whole place changed. Once the sun went down, the woods became much bigger. The trees that looked calm during the day turned into dark shapes that blocked out the sky. The trails looked different. The spaces between the trunks became black and deep. Every sound carried farther than it should have. A branch, snapping somewhere in the distance, could make you stop walking. A bird moving in the leaves could sound like a person hiding nearby. Even the wind felt strange when it moved through the trees at night. My friend and I loved that feeling. We were young, and at that age, being scared was part of the fun. We thought we were brave because we could walk through the woods in the dark without running back to camp. Every night during those camping trips, we would leave the campsite and walk through the woods together. We did it so often that we started calling it the ritual. It was our little tradition. After everyone else started settling down for the night, we would grab our flashlights and head out between the trees like we were going on some serious adventure. Looking back now, it was probably not the smartest thing for two teenagers to do. We were in a state park, and while it was not exactly the middle of nowhere, the woods were still real woods. It would have been easy to get turned around if we went too far. There were animals out there. There were uneven trails, roots, holes, and rocks we could trip over. And of course, there could always be other people, which is sometimes scarier than animals. But back then, we did not think about it like that. We thought of it as harmless fun. Most nights, we stayed close enough to the campground that we could find our way back easily. We had certain paths we liked to take, certain spots we would stop at, and certain trees or turns we recognized. We were not experts, but we knew the area around our campsite well enough to feel confident. We would walk, whisper, joke around, and sometimes try to scare each other. If one of us heard a sound, the other one would pretend it was a monster or some killer hiding in the trees. Then we would laugh and keep going. We always brought flashlights, but part of the game was trying not to use them. We liked to turn them off and let our eyes adjust to the darkness. We would move slowly, feeling our way along the trail, trying to use the moonlight or the faint glow from the campground behind us. It made everything more exciting. The woods seemed more alive when the flashlights were off. You could not see far, so your imagination filled in the rest. Every stump looked like a crouched figure. Every fallen branch looked like an arm reaching across the ground. On this particular night, we decided to go farther than usual. I do not remember exactly why. Maybe we were bored of the same route. Maybe we wanted to prove to ourselves that we were not scared. Maybe one of us dared the other. At that age, it did not take much to make us do something stupid. The campground was behind us. The night was quiet. And we just kept walking deeper into the woods. At first, it felt fun. We were laughing quietly and trying to move without turning on our flashlights. The ground was uneven, and we had to step carefully. Every now and then, one of us would stumble over a root or brush against a branch, then whisper something rude and try not to laugh too loudly. The farther we went, the quieter the campground became. The sounds of people and fires faded until they were almost gone. Eventually, we were far enough away that we could not hear much of anything except the woods around us. We were probably about half a mile from the nearest campsite when the mood started to change. Half a mile may not sound like much in the daytime, but in the woods at night, it feels far. It feels like the whole world is behind you, and only darkness is ahead. The trees seemed packed tighter together, and the path was harder to follow. The air felt cooler. We were still trying to act brave, but I think both of us knew we had gone farther than we normally did. That was when we heard whispering behind us. It was soft, but it was clear enough that we both heard it. At first, I thought maybe my friend had said something. I turned my head slightly, but he was already looking at me with the same confused expression. That told me he had heard it too, and it had not come from either of us. The whisper had come from somewhere behind us, back in the darkness we had just walked through. We froze. For a second, neither one of us moved. The woods were quiet again. I could hear my own breathing and the faint sound of leaves shifting. The whispering had been so low that I could not understand any words, but it had definitely sounded human. Not like an animal, not like wind. It sounded like a person speaking under their breath. We immediately turned on our flashlights. The bright beams cut through the darkness, and we spun around fast, shining the lights behind us and into the trees. The white light jumped from trunk to trunk, catching branches, leaves, and the rough ground. We searched the area where the whisper had come from, expecting to see someone standing there. Maybe another camper. Maybe a kid trying to scare us. Maybe one of our parents had followed us as a joke. Anything would have been better than seeing nothing. But there was no one there. The flashlight beams moved across empty trees. No person, no movement, no face staring back. Just the dark woods, now made even stranger by the sharp light and shadows. We stood there for a minute, listening, nothing. After a while, we tried to laugh it off. We told ourselves it was probably just the wind moving through the leaves or some animal making a weird sound. Maybe we had scared ourselves because we had gone too far. We were teenagers in the dark woods with our flashlights off. Of course, our brains were going to play tricks on us. That was the explanation we wanted to believe. So we kept walking. But we did not turn the flashlights off again right away. We continued deeper for a little while, though the fun had definitely changed. We were quieter now. We kept looking over our shoulders. The beam of my flashlight shook more than I wanted it to. I remember feeling annoyed at myself for being scared, but I could not help it. That whisper had sounded too close and too real. Then we heard it again. This time, there was no way to pretend it was nothing. The whispering came from behind us again, soft and low, like someone was trying to speak without being heard clearly. It was not loud enough for us to understand the words, but it had a rhythm to it. It sounded like a person mumbling to themselves, repeating strange little pieces of speech under their breath. We stopped immediately. My friend and I turned around again, flashlights raised. This time, we did not just sweep the lights quickly and move on. We stood there and searched more carefully. We pointed the beams at the trees, the ground, the bushes, and the spaces between them. We listened hard, trying to hear movement. I felt my heart start pounding. The whispering had stopped again, but the feeling it left behind was awful. There is something especially scary about hearing a voice when you cannot see the person it belongs to. If someone had stepped out and said, "Hey, I'm lost," it would have startled us. But at least we would know what we were dealing with. Instead, we had a whisper in the dark and no body attached to it. We decided it was time to head back. Neither of us said it in a dramatic way. We did not scream or run, but we both knew we were done. The ritual was over for that night. We had gone far enough. Whatever bravery we thought we had was gone. The campground suddenly felt very far away, and I wanted to be back near the fires, the tents, and the normal human sounds. We turned around and started walking back the way we had come. At first, we moved quickly, but tried not to panic. We did not want to trip or lose the trail. The flashlights stayed on now, and we kept them pointed ahead and to the sides. Every few steps, one of us would look back. I kept expecting to hear the whisper again. I kept expecting to see someone standing between the trees behind us. Then we finally saw what was making the sound. At first, my flashlight passed over something low to the ground, and my brain did not understand it right away. It looked like a dark shape moving where no shape should have been. I stopped so suddenly that my friend almost ran into me. I moved the beam back, and that was when we saw her. There was a woman crawling on the ground. She was down low, moving through the dirt and leaves, almost like she was trying to stay hidden or like she did not know how to stand properly. She was wearing dark clothes, which made her hard to see in the woods. She was covered in dirt. Her hair and clothes looked messy, and she was whispering random words to herself as she crawled. For a second, I could not breathe. It was one of the creepiest things I had ever seen. We were already scared from hearing the whispers, and now there was a grown woman crawling through the woods in the dark, like something out of a horror movie. She did not look normal. She did not look like someone out for a walk. She looked like she had come out of the ground. My friend and I stood there with our flashlights on her, too shocked to say anything. Then she noticed that we had seen her. The moment she realized we were looking at her, she stopped crawling. For one awful second, she just looked at us from the ground. Then she stood up. That was almost as scary as seeing her crawl. She rose to her feet in the middle of the dark woods, covered in dirt, wearing dark clothing, with our flashlights shining on her. My whole body was ready to run. I did not know if she was dangerous. I did not know if she was hurt. I did not know if someone else was with her. All I knew was that two teenagers had found a whispering woman crawling through the woods at night. Then she spoke. She declared that she was looking for her campsite. Her voice was strange, but at least she was talking to us like a person now. That helped a little, but not completely. The whole situation was still deeply unsettling. She was dirty, confused, and clearly not fully aware of where she was. She had been crawling around and whispering random words, and now she was standing in front of us saying she was trying to find her campsite. We did not know what else to do, so we tried to help her. Even though we were scared, it became obvious pretty quickly that she was lost. She did not seem like she was trying to hurt us. She seemed out of it. Maybe drunk, maybe high, maybe both. She was not making much sense at first, but we were able to understand that she had left her group and could not find her way back. She had apparently been trying to find a bathroom and somehow wandered away from the campground. That was terrifying in a different way. The woods were confusing even for us, and we were sober teenagers with flashlights who knew we were not supposed to go too far. She was an adult, but she was in no condition to navigate through trees in the middle of the night. If we had not gone farther than usual, she might have stayed out there all night. She could have fallen, gotten hurt, passed out, or walked even deeper into the woods. It was cold, dark, and far from where people were sleeping. Anything could have happened to her. We started walking her back toward the campground. It was awkward and creepy at the same time. My friend and I kept glancing at each other, both of us probably thinking the same thing. This was not how our ritual usually went. We were supposed to be having a little scary adventure, not escorting a dirty, confused woman out of the woods after finding her crawling on the ground and whispering to herself. She kept talking as we walked, but not everything she said made sense. Sometimes she mumbled. Sometimes she repeated random things. She was unsteady, and we had to make sure she kept going in the right direction. I remember feeling nervous that she might suddenly change or get angry, but she never did. She mostly seemed lost, disoriented, and embarrassed in a foggy sort of way. As we got closer to the campground, the normal sounds slowly came back. That was a huge relief. The distant glow of campfires, the sound of people talking quietly, the shape of tents and campers between the trees, all of it made me feel like we had returned to the real world. The woman seemed to recognize some of it too, but she still could not clearly tell us where her group was. We tried to help her find her campsite. That took some time, because she was too out of it to give clear directions. We asked questions, but the answers were not very helpful. She could not explain exactly where she had come from. She did not seem to remember which way she had walked. We moved around the campground with her, trying to figure out where she belonged. I remember feeling strange about the whole thing, because there we were, two teenagers who had found a grown adult lost in the woods, now trying to return her to people who did not even know she was missing. Eventually, we found her group. And that was when we realized they had not noticed she was gone. That part bothered me. Her friends, or whoever she was camping with, had no idea she had wandered off into the woods. They had not been looking for her. They had not sounded worried. They had not noticed that one of their own people was missing long enough to end up half a mile away, crawling in the dirt, whispering to herself in the dark. From what we were able to understand, she had been very drunk or high and had gone looking for a bathroom. Instead of finding it, she got turned around and wandered into the woods. At some point, she must have fallen or started crawling, either because she was confused, scared, or too messed up to walk properly. She ended up far from the campsites, whispering random words to herself while moving through the dirt. Once everything was explained, it became less supernatural, but not less creepy. In some ways, it was even scarier because it was real. At first, when we heard the whispering behind us, our minds went straight to horror movie ideas. A ghost, a crazy person, something hiding in the woods, something following us. And then, when we saw her crawling on the ground, it looked exactly like the kind of thing you never want to see at night in the forest. But the truth was that she was a lost person who could have been in serious danger. If my friend and I had not decided to walk farther than usual that night, we never would have found her. If we had turned back earlier, she might have stayed lost. If we had been too scared and run away without helping her, she could have spent the entire night in the woods. She might have fallen into a ditch, gotten hurt, or been unable to find her way back until morning. And depending on the weather, that could have been dangerous. After we got her back, my friend and I returned to our own campsite. But we were not laughing like usual. The ritual did not feel fun anymore that night. We had gone out looking for a little excitement and came back with a story that was much stranger than anything we could have made up. I remember lying down later and still hearing that whisper in my head. The soft voice behind us. The way it stopped when we turned around. The way our flashlights found nothing at first. Then, the sight of her crawling through the dirt. For a long time after that, I thought about how easily the situation could have gone another way. We could have ignored the whispering and kept walking deeper. We could have panicked when we saw her and run, leaving her there. She could have been someone dangerous instead of someone lost. Her friends could have spent the next morning searching for her, not knowing where she had gone. A lot of things could have happened. That night taught me that the woods do not need anything supernatural to be terrifying. Darkness, distance, confusion, and people are enough. A normal campground can become frightening when you step just far enough away from the lights. A harmless walk can turn strange in seconds. A whisper in the trees can make your whole body go cold. I still think about that woman sometimes. I wonder if she remembered any of it the next day. I wonder if she woke up embarrassed or scared or with no memory of crawling through the woods. I wonder if her friends realized how serious it could have been. I hope they did. I hope they understood that she was lucky 2 teenagers happened to be out there that night, doing something they probably should not have been doing either. Because if we had not gone that far into the woods, she might have been lost all night. And for us, even though it turned out to have a simple explanation, it was still one of the creepiest things we ever experienced while camping. We went into the woods expecting darkness, branches, and maybe a few scary sounds. We did not expect to hear whispering behind us. We did not expect to find a woman crawling through the dirt, covered in darkness and mumbling random words. That is why I never forgot it. Sometimes the scariest thing in the woods is not a ghost or a monster. Sometimes it is just a real person, lost in the dark, whispering behind you. When I was 16, my grandparents asked me to house sit for them while they were away for 3 weeks. They lived in a farmhouse in a small town, the kind of place where everyone knew each other. But houses still sat far enough apart that night could feel very quiet. Their home was big, old, and surrounded by open land, fields, and long stretches of darkness. During the day, it felt peaceful. There was space everywhere, and the air smelled cleaner than it did in town. But at night, when all the lights were off and the house settled into silence, it felt completely different. I was young, but I did not think of myself as a scared kid. I was 16, and being trusted to stay in a big farmhouse alone for 3 weeks made me feel older and more responsible. My grandparents had left me instructions, and I knew what I needed to do. I had to feed the dogs, keep an eye on the house, make sure things stayed locked, and take care of the normal little tasks around the place. Their house was familiar to me, so I did not feel like I was staying somewhere strange. Still, being alone in that house was not always easy. It was a large place, and big empty houses make sounds. At night, every creak seems louder. The walls shift. The floors pop. The wind moves around the corners. Sometimes the pipes make noises. Sometimes the whole house seems to breathe. Most of the time, I told myself it was normal. Old houses have their own sounds, and after a while, you get used to them. What helped the most was that my grandparents had 3 German shepherds. They were big dogs, strong and alert, and they made me feel much safer. They were the kind of dogs that noticed everything. If something moved outside, they knew. If someone pulled into the driveway, they knew before I did. If a bird landed too close to the porch or a leaf moved in the wrong way, they would bark like the whole world was ending. Because of them, I felt like nothing could sneak up on the house without being noticed. For most of the 3 weeks, everything went fine. The days passed normally. I took care of the house, watched TV, ate whatever food had been left for me, and tried to enjoy the freedom of being alone. At first, the nights felt strange, but by the second week, I had settled into a routine. I locked the doors, checked on the dogs, turned off lights I was not using, and went to bed. Nothing unusual happened. No strange people came by. No windows were broken. No creepy sounds turned out to be anything more than the house or the weather. By the second to last night, I was feeling pretty proud of myself. I had almost made it through the whole stay without any problems. My grandparents would be home soon, and I could tell them everything had gone smoothly. For a 16-year-old staying alone in a big empty farmhouse for 3 weeks, I thought I had handled it pretty well. Then that night happened. It was around 1 in the morning when a thunderstorm started outside. At first, it was just distant thunder and light rain, the kind of storm that rolls in slowly. I could hear the rain tapping against the windows and the wind moving around the house. I'd been awake late, probably watching TV or doing something to pass the time. But once the storm started getting stronger, I decided it was time to shut everything off and go to bed. There is something about a storm at night that makes a house feel smaller and bigger at the same time. Smaller because you feel closed inside it, surrounded by wind and rain. Bigger because every room beyond the one you are in becomes dark and empty. The thunder makes the walls shake a little, and every flash of lightning changes the shape of the room for 1 second before throwing everything back into darkness. I was upstairs in the front bedroom. That room overlooked the driveway, so from the window you could see if anyone came up to the house. The bed was in there, and the 3 German shepherds were lying at the foot of it like they usually did. That alone made me feel better. They were calm and relaxed, stretched out like nothing in the world was wrong. At some point, I was in the bathroom using the toilet when I heard a loud noise outside. It was hard to place at first because the storm was already making noise, but this sound was different. It was low, heavy, and mechanical. The best way I can describe it is that it sounded like a tractor or a riding mower. It had that rough engine sound, like something large and motorized moving nearby. At first, I tried not to get scared, My uncle lived down the street from my grandparents, and he was the one who took care of the lawn and outdoor work around their house. It was not unusual for him to be around the property sometimes. If I heard a tractor or mower during the day, I would not have thought twice about it. But this was not during the day. It was 1 in the morning, and there was a thunderstorm outside. That was what made it strange. No one would be mowing the lawn in the middle of the night during a storm. No one would be driving a tractor around for normal yard work at that hour. I sat there, listening, trying to make sense of it. Maybe my uncle had come over for some reason. Maybe he was checking on the house because of the storm. Maybe there was some problem outside, and he had brought equipment to deal with it. That was the explanation I wanted to believe. Then, I heard the side door open. The sound was clear enough that I knew what it was. It was not thunder. It was not wind. It was the sound of the side door downstairs opening. After that, I heard footsteps enter below me. Heavy footsteps. They sounded like work boots. That made me think of my uncle even more because he wore work boots when he came over to do anything around the property. The footsteps were solid, loud, and familiar in a way. For a few seconds, I told myself it had to be him. Maybe the power was going to go out, and he had come to help. Maybe he thought I might be nervous alone in the house during the storm. Maybe he had come in through the side door because he knew the house and did not want to wake me. But almost immediately, something felt wrong. The dogs were still lying at the foot of the bed. They were not barking. They were not growling. They were not even lifting their heads in alarm. That made no sense. These dogs reacted to everything. If a leaf fell outside 15 feet away, they would lose their minds. If someone walked anywhere near the house, they would bark before the person reached the door. If my uncle had really pulled up outside, opened the side door, and walked in wearing boots, those dogs should have gone wild. They should have been at the stairs, barking and pushing toward whoever had come inside. But they were completely unaware. They were lying there as if nothing had happened. That was the first moment I felt real fear. Not confusion. Not mild nervousness. Fear. Because if someone was in the house, the dogs should have known. If the dogs did not know, then what exactly was I hearing? I finished quickly and went toward the bedroom window that looked over the driveway. I wanted to see my uncle's vehicle, or the tractor, or some sign that would explain the noise. I moved carefully, feeling tense, but still trying to stay calm. The storm flashed outside, and rain ran down the glass. I looked out at the driveway. There was nothing there. No car, no truck, no tractor, no riding mower, no headlights, no one standing outside. The driveway was empty. I stared down at it, trying to understand how that was possible. I had heard an engine. I had heard the side door open. I had heard work boots walking downstairs. But there was no vehicle outside. There was no reason for anyone to be in the house. My uncle was not there. No one was there. Then, the stomping downstairs got louder. It started as footsteps, but now it became heavier and more forceful. It sounded like someone walking hard across the floor below me, not caring if they made noise. The sound moved through the downstairs part of the house, echoing up through the floor. My body went cold. Then I heard banging. It sounded like someone was below me, hitting the ceiling with something long and hard. The best way I can explain it is that it sounded like someone taking a broom handle and slamming it upward into the ceiling beneath the room I was in. Bang, 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 the sound came from below, right under me, like whoever was downstairs knew exactly where I was and wanted me to know they were there. That was when the dogs finally reacted. All 3 German shepherds suddenly went wild. They jumped up and started barking like crazy. The calm, sleepy dogs from a few moments earlier were gone. Now they were alert, furious, and scared. Their barking filled the room. They were moving around, looking toward the door, reacting to the noise below us. That should have made me feel safer, but it did not. It only made everything worse, because now I knew the dogs heard it too. I was not imagining it. Something was happening in that house. The storm outside got stronger at the same time. Thunder cracked overhead, louder than before, and the rain hit the windows harder. The wind pushed against the house. The dogs were barking. The stomping downstairs was getting louder. The banging on the ceiling kept happening. It felt like everything was building at once, like the storm and whatever was inside the house were connected somehow. I went into full panic mode. I was 16, alone in a farmhouse at 1 in the morning during a thunderstorm, and it sounded like someone was downstairs banging on the ceiling below me. The dogs were losing their minds. There was no vehicle in the driveway. My uncle was not there. I had no explanation for any of it. My mind started racing. Should I run? Should I lock myself in the room? Should I go downstairs? Absolutely not. Should I call someone? Yes, I needed to call my uncle. I needed an adult. I needed help. I remember grabbing my phone with shaking hands, trying to think clearly while the noise kept going. Then, instantly, the power went out. Everything went black. And at the exact same time, everything stopped. The dogs stopped barking. The stomping stopped. The banging stopped. The whole house went silent. That sudden silence was almost worse than the noise. 1 second, there had been thunder, barking, stomping, and banging. The next second, the room was pitch black and still. It felt like someone had cut the whole world off at once. The only thing I could hear was my own breathing, and maybe the rain outside, but even that seemed far away for a moment. I was terrified. The darkness was complete. There were no lights from the hallway, no glow from the room, nothing. The storm had taken the power, and the farmhouse was now just a black, empty shell around me. I could not see the dogs clearly. I could not see the doorway. I could not see the corners of the room. Every part of me expected the stomping to start again. I expected the banging to return. I expected to hear someone coming up the stairs. But there was nothing. I climbed into the bed and hid under the covers like a little kid, even though I was 16 and wanted to believe I was too old for that. In that moment, I did not care. I pulled the covers over myself and tried to call my uncle in a complete panic. My hands were shaking so much that using the phone felt difficult. I was scared the call would not go through. I was scared my battery would die. I was scared I would hear footsteps outside the bedroom door before anyone answered. For about 5 full minutes, the room stayed pitch black. 5 minutes does not sound like a long time until you are sitting in the dark, alone, after hearing something impossible inside the house. Then, it feels endless. Every second stretches. Your ears become too sharp. You hear small sounds you would normally ignore. You imagine movement where there is none. You think about the stairs, the hallway, the door, the space under the bed, the corners of the room. You wonder if something is standing just outside your sight. The strangest part was the dogs. They had stopped completely when the power went out. Not slowly. Not after calming down. They stopped all at once, just like the stomping and banging. That made no sense. Dogs do not usually work that way. If they are barking at someone in the house, they keep barking. If the power goes out, they might bark more. But these dogs went silent at the same moment everything else did. It was like whatever had set them off had vanished in an instant. After those terrifying minutes, everything felt normal again. The noise did not come back. The dogs were no longer going crazy. The storm started to pass not long after. The house returned to that normal old house quiet, the kind I had grown used to over the previous weeks. No more footsteps, no more banging, no more engine outside, no side door opening again. Nothing It was as if it had never happened. But I knew it had. I had heard the engine. I had heard the side door open. I had heard heavy boots downstairs. I had looked out and seen no one in the driveway. I had heard the stomping grow louder. I had heard the banging on the ceiling below me. The dogs had reacted. They had gone completely wild. Then the power went out, and everything had stopped at exactly the same time. I do not have a good explanation for that night. Maybe there is some logical answer somewhere. Maybe the storm caused strange sounds in the house. Maybe thunder echoed in a way that made it sound like footsteps. Maybe the wind pushed the side door or something near it. Maybe the dogs reacted late because they finally heard the storm or sensed my fear. Maybe the power outage caused something electrical or mechanical to stop all at once. I have thought about explanations like that, but none of them fully fit what I experienced. The thing that still bothers me most is how specific the sounds were. A tractor or riding mower outside. The side door opening. Work boots walking in below me. Banging on the ceiling like someone was directly under the room. Those were not vague little noises. They were clear enough that my mind connected them to real things I knew. And the dogs were not the kind of animals that ignored people entering the house. That night was the second to last night of my stay. And I do not think I truly relaxed again until my grandparents came home. I had spent almost 3 weeks alone there without a problem. And then right at the end, the house gave me the scariest night I had ever had. Afterward, every small noise felt suspicious. Every creak made me listen. Every rumble outside made me think about that engine sound. I kept checking the driveway, expecting to see something there, even though I had seen nothing the first time. I still remember the feeling of standing at that upstairs window, looking down at an empty driveway while footsteps moved through the house below me. That moment is burned into my memory. It was the moment I realized that the explanation I had given myself was wrong. If it had been my uncle, there would have been a truck. If it had been a tractor, there would have been a tractor. If someone had really come inside, the dogs should have reacted right away. But none of it lined up. And then there was the silence after the power went out. That is the part I will never forget. The instant stop. Not one sound fading away naturally. Not the dogs barking a little longer. Not the footsteps continuing for a second. Everything stopped together, like a switch had been flipped. The power, the banging, the stomping, the dogs, all of it cut off at once. I've been through storms since then. I have heard houses make strange sounds. I have heard animals outside and branches hit windows and thunder shake walls. None of it has ever felt like that night. That night felt like something entered the house with the storm, made itself known, and then disappeared the moment the lights went out. I know how that sounds, and I am not saying I know what it was. I do not know. Maybe it was something normal that happened to line up in the worst possible way. Maybe it was the storm playing tricks on the house in my mind. Maybe fear made the sounds seem closer and more human than they were. But I also know what I heard. I know how those dogs normally acted. And I know how scared I was hiding under those covers, trying to reach my uncle while the room stayed black around me. To this day, it remains the scariest and weirdest night I have ever experienced. Nothing came of it afterward. No one was found in the house. Nothing was broken. The storm passed. The dogs went back to normal. The farmhouse was quiet again, as if it had never done anything strange at all. But for those few minutes, in that dark room above the empty driveway, I was sure something was inside with me. I stayed at my friend's house for 2 weeks one summer to take care of his cat. It was supposed to be a simple favor. He was going out of town, and he needed someone he trusted to stay with the cat, feed him, clean up after him, and make sure he did not lose his mind while the house was empty. I had watched pets for people before, but normally I did not sleep over at someone's house just for that. I would usually stop by once or twice a day, give the animal food and water, check that everything was okay, then go back home. But this cat was different. My friend warned me ahead of time that his cat had anxiety problems. He was not the kind of cat who could be left alone overnight without making it everyone's problem. If he got too stressed, he would tear things up, not just knock something off a table or scratch a couch a little. He would destroy things. My friend told me that if the cat was left alone all night, there was a good chance I would come back in the morning and find the place looking like a small tornado had passed through it. Curtains scratched up, papers shredded, things knocked over, maybe even furniture damaged. So because of that, he asked if I could actually stay at the house while he was gone. I agreed because it did not seem like a big deal. 2 weeks in a quiet house, a cat to keep company, and a little time away from my own place. It sounded easy enough. My friend told me I could sleep in his bedroom, and that made sense because it was already set up, and the cat was used to the house being used that way. I brought some clothes, my phone charger, and whatever else I needed. Then settled in. His bedroom was not huge, but it had an unusual setup. The bed was one of those loft beds, raised up high with a desk underneath it. It was the kind of bed you have to climb into, almost like a bunk bed without the lower bunk. The desk sat under it, and the sleeping area was near the ceiling. From the bed, you could see across the room toward the closet and the bedroom door that led into the hall. I did not like that setup at night. During the day, it was fine. The room looked normal. The bed was high, the desk was underneath, and the closet was just a closet. But at night, everything felt different. The bed being up high made me feel a little trapped. If something happened, I could not just roll out of bed and run. I had to climb down carefully. The closet faced the bed directly, and the hallway door was also in view, so when I was lying there in the dark, both of the places my mind wanted to watch were right in front of me. Another thing that bothered me was the light switch. I could not reach it from the bed. Once I turned the lights off, I had to feel my way through the dark and climb up to the loft bed without being able to see much of anything. That might not sound like a big problem, but anyone who has done that in a strange room knows how uncomfortable it can feel. You turn off the light, and suddenly the whole room changes. You know where everything is supposed to be, but you still move slowly with your hands out because you do not want to bump into the desk, trip over something, or step on the cat. Then you climb up into bed, and once you are there, you are stuck in the dark. The first few nights were completely fine. Nothing strange happened. I fed the cat, cleaned whatever needed cleaning, and spent the evenings relaxing. The cat was quiet after he ate, which was a relief. He might have been anxious when alone, but while I was there, he seemed mostly calm. He would wander around, sit nearby, sometimes act like he wanted attention, and then go do his own thing. I would chill for a bit, watch something, scroll on my phone, and eventually get ready for bed. At night, I would turn off the light, move carefully across the room, climb up into the loft bed, and settle in. The room would be extremely dark. Not just dim, but truly dark. Some rooms still have a little glow from streetlights or electronics, but this room felt like it swallowed light. Once I was in bed, I could barely make out the shape of the closet or the doorway. Most of what I saw was just blackness. Still, those first nights were normal enough that I stopped worrying about it. I got used to the climb. I got used to the strange view from the bed. I got used to the quiet house and the cat moving around sometimes. I told myself the whole thing was going to be easy. Then one night, I woke up. That by itself was not too unusual. I normally sleep very soundly, but every now and then I wake up in the middle of the night for no clear reason. Sometimes I get too warm. Sometimes a sound wakes me. Sometimes I need to move or get water. It happens. But this time felt different right away. My eyes opened suddenly, like someone had flipped a switch in my head. I was not half awake. I was not groggy. I was not slowly coming out of a dream. One second I was asleep, and the next second my eyes were open, staring into the dark room. I did not feel hot or cold. I was not uncomfortable. I had not been having a nightmare, at least not one I could remember. There was no loud noise that I could point to. Nothing had obviously woken me up. But I was awake, very awake. The first strange thing I noticed was the way I was lying. I was flat on my back. That was not normal for me. I usually sleep on my stomach or on my side. I almost never sleep straight on my back like that, especially not in a strange bed. But there I was, lying perfectly flat, facing the ceiling, with my body still and heavy under the blankets. I raised my head and looked around the room. At first, I could not see much. The darkness was thick, and my eyes had to work hard to pick out shapes. I could barely see the outline of the closet. The door to the hall was just a darker shape inside the dark. The desk below the bed was hidden in shadow. Nothing looked clear. Nothing moved. But almost immediately, I began to feel wrong. That is the only way I can describe it. Wrong, it was not a normal kind of fear at first. I was not thinking, there is someone in the room. I was not thinking, something bad is about to happen. It was more like my body knew something before my mind did. The room felt heavier than it had before. The air felt too still. I had this strange feeling that I had opened my eyes for a reason, even if I did not know what that reason was yet. I tried to close my eyes and go back to sleep. That should have been easy. It was the middle of the night. I was in bed. I had no reason to be awake. But the moment I closed my eyes, something in me refused to relax. It felt like a part of my mind was standing guard, telling me not to fall asleep. I tried to ignore it. I told myself I was being weird. I told myself it was just the darkness of an unfamiliar room. I told myself the cat was probably moving around somewhere and that my brain had picked up on it. But I could not settle. So I opened my eyes again. This time I stared hard into the darkness. My eyes had adjusted a little more by then. Not enough to see everything clearly, but enough that the black room began to separate into shapes. The closet came into view first. The open space of it looked darker than the walls around it. I could see hanging clothes, or at least I thought I could. Everything was vague and shadowy, and I kept trying to make sense of it. Then, I saw something inside the closet. A figure. At first, I stared at it without breathing. It was standing or hanging there in the darkness, directly in the closet, facing the bed. I could not see a face. I could not see details. It was just a shape, but it looked too much like a person. It was tall enough, dark enough, and formed in a way that made my stomach tighten. I tried to reason with myself right away. It had to be a coat. That was the most obvious answer. My friend probably had a dark jacket hanging in the closet, and because I was half awake in a dark room, my mind was turning it into a person. That happens all the time. Everyone has looked at a pile of clothes in the dark and thought it was someone standing there. It was probably just that. I kept staring, waiting for my brain to settle the image into something normal. But then it moved, not like a coat shifting because of air, not like a hanging shirt swaying slightly. It moved like something alive. My heart seemed to stop for a second. The shape inside the closet shifted forward, slowly and silently. and I realized it was not staying in the closet. It was coming out. I wanted to sit up. I wanted to scream. I wanted to grab my phone, turn on the flashlight, do anything. But my body would not respond. The figure moved toward the end of the bed. The loft bed had a frame and a foot area where something could climb up if it wanted to. I watched in complete horror as the dark shape climbed up the end of the bed. It moved slowly, not rushing, not stumbling, almost like it knew exactly where it was going. It reached the edge near my feet and began to come over the end of the bed until it was hanging over my legs. That was when I realized I could not move. I could move my head a little, and I could close my eyes, but everything below my neck felt locked in place. My arms would not lift. My legs would not kick. My hands would not reach for anything. I tried to force myself to move, but it was like my body did not belong to me. I was trapped flat on my back, with that thing hanging over my legs. Then I heard breathing. At least, I thought I did. It was slow and close, in and out, in and out. It came from the darkness near my legs, from the shape at the end of the bed. I could not see enough to make out a face, but I could hear it breathing. That sound was worse than seeing it move. The movement could maybe be explained somehow. The darkness could maybe trick my eyes. But breathing made it feel real, alive, close enough to touch me. I wanted to scream, but I could not. I wanted to call out for help, but my voice would not work. I was in someone else's house, in someone else's bedroom, high up in a loft bed, with a dark figure hanging over me, and I could not move anything below my neck. The fear was so strong that it felt like it filled the whole room. I did the only thing I could do. I shut my eyes. I squeezed them closed as hard as possible, like a child trying to make a nightmare disappear. I did not want to see it anymore. I could not handle watching that dark shape over my legs. I could not handle waiting for it to move closer. So I pinched my eyes shut and kept them shut, even though that meant I could no longer see where it was. But closing my eyes did not make the breathing stop. I could still hear it. In and out. In and out. It sounded close, steady, and patient. I lay there, unable to move, listening to it breathe, waiting for something to touch me. My whole body wanted to thrash and run, but nothing worked. I was completely trapped in my own skin. I do not know how long it lasted. It could have been a minute. It could have been 10. Time does not feel normal when you are that scared. Every second feels too long. At some point, I must have fallen asleep again. I do not remember the breathing stopping. I do not remember the figure leaving. I do not remember feeling safe. One moment, I was lying there with my eyes shut tight, listening to that sound, and the next thing I knew, I was waking up in the morning. It was 7 o'clock. I was still flat on my back. For a moment, everything felt normal. Morning light had changed the room. The darkness was gone. The closet was just a closet again. The doorway looked ordinary. The desk under the bed looked normal. The fear from the night before had not fully returned yet, and for a few seconds, I did not remember what had happened. Then it came back. All at once. The figure in the closet. The movement. The way it climbed up the end of the bed. The breathing. The way my body would not move. My eyes went straight to the closet. In the daylight, there was nothing strange there. Clothes, shadows, normal things. No figure. No sign that anything had happened. But I did not care. I grabbed my phone and my clothes as fast as I could. I did not want to stay in that room for another second. I climbed down from the loft bed, barely paying attention to how quickly I was moving, and got out of there. I did not calmly get ready. I did not sit and think about it. I sprinted out of the room like something might still be behind me. Later, I told my dad what had happened. He listened, and then he told me it was probably sleep paralysis. He said he had experienced it when he was around the same age. When he explained it, it made sense. Sleep paralysis can happen when your mind wakes up before your body does. You can feel awake, but your body is still locked in the sleep state, and because of that, you cannot move. People sometimes see figures, hear sounds, feel something near them, or believe something is in the room. It can feel completely real even though it is connected to sleep. Logically, that explanation fit almost perfectly. I had woken up suddenly. I was lying on my back, which is a common position for sleep paralysis. I could move my head and close my eyes, but I could not move the rest of my body. I saw a dark figure. I heard breathing. Then I fell asleep again and woke up later. My dad's explanation made more sense than believing something had actually crawled out of the closet and climbed onto the bed. But knowing the explanation did not make me feel better. Not really. Because when it was happening, it did not feel like a dream. It did not feel like my imagination. It felt real. I felt awake. I saw the room around me. I knew where I was. I knew I was in my friend's house. I knew the closet was across from the bed. I knew I was not dreaming in the normal way. And I heard that breathing as clearly as if someone were right there. That is what people who have never had sleep paralysis do not always understand. You can explain it afterward. You can talk about the brain and the body and the sleep cycle. You can tell yourself it was not real. But the memory still feels like it happened in the room with you. The fear stays in your body because your body experienced it as real. I still had to finish the rest of the 2 weeks at my friend's house. But I did not sleep in that bedroom again the same way. For the rest of my time there, I slept on the couch with the lights on. I did not care if it seemed ridiculous. I did not care if the bedroom was probably safe. I was not climbing back into that loft bed in pitch blackness and facing that closet again. The couch was lower to the ground. The living room felt more open. The lights stayed on, and that made me feel like I had some control. The cat probably did not understand why I changed my routine, but he did not seem to mind. He still got fed. He still had company. And I still stayed overnight like I was supposed to. I just avoided that room as much as possible once night came. During the day, I could go in there if I needed something, but after dark, I did not want anything to do with it. I kept thinking about the closet. I knew it had probably been clothes. I knew my brain had probably shaped the darkness into something frightening. I knew the breathing might have been part of the paralysis, or even my own breathing sounding strange in the room. I knew all of that. But I also knew that I had seen it move. I had watched it climb. I had felt it hanging over my legs, and I had heard it breathe. That memory was enough to keep me on the couch with every light on until my friend came home.